A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes, as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. That is the end of the Red Rising series so far published. So that means through the end of Dark Age by Pierce Brown. Catch up. Finish the book. Catch up. Listen to us. Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
So, the last few weeks we've gotten pretty coy with like if you haven't gotten to this point in the intro, and I thought you were going to do it again today. Like, if you haven't seen the very thick page at the back of the book, turn around now, something like that. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to get creative with it. But
we're at like the end though, so it felt a little bit different, but I feel you. I maybe could have done like, if you didn't see Selenius's thick thighs, turn back. You know? Could have done that, I guess.
Selenius's thick thighs.
It could have worked. Right off the bat with the quote of the episode. Here I am, showing up. So today is two different things for everyone. Today is our 14th and final episode covering Dark Age by Pierce Brown, the novel itself, and we're going to tackle chapters 86 through the end. But in addition to that, it is our year of being a published podcast. This is our first anniversary, which is fantastic that the stars aligned this way and that everything else worked out. So
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I think we celebrate a little bit.
Yeah.
How do we celebrate on this show?
We drink, don't we? Isn't that?
I think so.
It's an unfortunate side effect of the show, but it's also, I mean, it's, there's like a combination of things where it's like, yeah, it's the point, but also, it's the point. You're right. Good call. So to everyone at home who's listening to us, if you're at work or whatever, when a lot of people listen to us or driving or something like that, don't drink right now unless you can do it on the job, in which case, good for you. Don't condone that. But if you're at home enjoying us or later when you get home, take a swig for us. Cheers, PJ, and everyone who listens to us for a year. We are so happy to have the community and crowd around us that we do, and we can't believe the sort of reaction to our show over the last year and all the sort of overflowing of kindness and encouragement as we've ironed out the kinks and grown. So thank you so much to everyone.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been such a fun journey to be on, and I'm so happy to share it with all of you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So, cheers. With that, though, let's talk about what we just cheersed.
Yeah.
So, PJ, what are you drinking? What did you just drink?
So, I have titled it The Red Rain. And effectively what it is a Toronto, which is 2 ounces of rye, half an ounce of Fernet Branca, half a tablespoon of simple syrup, and then I didn't have rye, so I did it with bourbon, hence the name change. And it usually calls for an orange garnish, and I didn't have an orange. So we're going garnishless and bourbon instead of rye. So
you should have stuck a knife in it. Just put a knife in it for the photo. You know what I mean?
I should have.
Just for no reason other than to have the knife.
Something like that. That would have been good. Following that up, though, is one of it's almost like my white whale beer. This is 2015 Surly Darkness. It is a beer that I've had in my fridge for a very long time. It is, I think, the first Russian Imperial Stout I ever bought. This is... God, it's such a good beer. It is one of the last beers that Tom Hogg had a really major hand in at Surly. He eventually moved on from the company he helped start, to Three Floyds, where he's still at.
Of which is nationally distributed comparatively. I mean, Surly's
gets around, but yeah, you can find Three Floyds a lot more, I think. But this is just so... It's what I compare all other Russian Imperials to. It is my favorite Russian Imperial Stout of all time. And I just cracked this for the first time in a long time. I'm having this beer, and it holds up. It's so good. It's rich. It's chocolatey. It is just perfect. And I think this is probably the right time to open it. So if you're sitting on a 2015 Surly Darkness, it is in its prime right now. It is drinking so well. So sorry to get gushy over a beer, but I mean,
good for you, for the beer, for everyone involved. I mean, I feel like I just loved the whole breakdown there. So I also love Darkness. I think that it's fantastic. I would agree with you that it's kind of the white whale. It was the first serious stout, an Imperial Russian stout that I ever had, followed by Big Rick shortly thereafter. But it's I am very happy to be here at this point, and drinking Darkness for a very kind of dark episode makes some sense.
Yeah, that definitely helped swayed my choice to pick it.
It fits, it's an interesting culmination and conclusion. Similarly, to hop in here, I am drinking a gift that was given to me, but to the both of us, really. I think my parents made a joke that it's my Christmas present, which may also make sense that I would have to share it, because that sounds like an oldest child thing to do, for sure. Here's this present. Make sure that you share some with PJ. My parents went to Seattle to visit my sister and her new gig and whatnot, and went to a distillery up there called Woodinville and bought their cask strength bourbon, of which they also, for our 1-year anniversary, put and etched the podcast name on it. So Words and Whiskey branded-ish bourbon from Woodinville, a small Washington distillery. And it is fucking delicious. Like, this is one of the better bourbons that I've had in a while. I think I literally talked about the End of Days bourbon last week that I had a little bit of, which is also crazy good. These are two of the best bourbons that I've ever had, hands down.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Neither of them are coming from Kentucky, huh?
Yeah, right. So technically they aren't bourbons or whatever, but it's fantastic. So I'm just having 2 ounces of this straight up. To follow that up, because it's it's a 60% whiskey. So let's be very clear that 2 ounces is not a weak pour by any stretch. I also have an 8-minute song, which I've talked about before on the show, from Wilmington Brewing Company, and then, for one of our patrons of whom said, do this, I also grabbed a Wild Berry Truly out of the fridge. Here I am, living my best life. It's the last episode of the show. Fuck me up.
If I somehow end up with an empty drink, 2 empty drinks, I will go grab a seltzer as well.
All right. That seems legit. All right, PJ. So here's the thing. We have last week's predictions, right? But it's got to be all the predictions at this point, because we're out of book.
We are out of book. Though we do intend to cover the next book, so if there's anything that doesn't get answered, we can roll it over, can't we?
I mean, we can, and I think
we'll resolve it for now. If it hasn't been resolved, I'll drink for it. How about that?
Sure. Yes.
I don't know if any of them have been.
That seems legit. I mean, but one of them is really kind of a more of a positing question that we talked about a little bit. But yeah, so with that, we'll talk about the predictions. So the first one here is, will Lyria retain full control of her thoughts, or will the squid take over some function? You said,
I think it'll be a slower takeover. I think for now she'll have some conscious thought and interaction with the squid, but she won't be puppeted. That seems right. As far as we know, for now, she is completely in control of her own faculties, but has added sort of information given to her by Figment.
Yeah. I think the other part that we would be, a little bit ignorant to ignore is that obviously she has not only additional information, but she has longing for other things. So it's not that I think that a slow takeover is wrong, but I think she is kind of being puppeted, but she can resist it. Like, she's elements
being influenced, but not puppeted.
Yeah.
It's instilling a sense of longing, but it's not saying you're doing this now.
Right.
It's not
commanding.
taking away her agency.
It's a fair point. Fair point. Thoughts?
Oh,
Do I drink for this one?
I feel like that's the right call.
I think so. Yeah. So cheers.
Cheers.
I think I agree for the most part. We'll see how it fully pays off in the next book, but
I don't
that's
think
one
it's
that I think will hold
completely
over. But
I don't think it's completely resolved, but
I don't think until she gets to the Oculus or we realize what a fully functioning Figment how it could impact her. I think I agree with you. All right. From Lee Bronx on Reddit. At the beginning of Part 4 Pride, we were given a quote from Selenius' Meditations. The world is a maze without a center. Become it or be forever lost. There's a fairly famous mythical creature who guarded a maze or a labyrinth once upon a time. And wouldn't you know it, one of our characters uses said mythical creature as his moniker and or symbol. Do you think this foreshadows anything? And if so, what might that be? For Lysander, for Darrow, etc. Or is it simply a red herring? So this is more of like a metaphorical, thematic question, of which I really love. Really a big fan of this question because it let us kind of talk about it and break it down in, you know, our sort of usual style. But yeah, go ahead.
Verbatim what I said last time. I don't think Pierce would unintentionally make a parallel like that in regards to mythology, so it's definitely intended. And furthermore, I think it's not laid out obviously enough to be a red herring. I think that it foreshadows Apple taking the reins in some part of the next iteration of the society. Not sure if that means sovereignship, unless Lysander dies, but some sort of leading spot. That seems likely at this point. I don't know. Nobody knows at this point, but obviously there's conversation together at the end of this book. I don't know how to read it. What do you think?
You know, I think that this is more of a kind of metaphorical question, and I think this will really play in, you know, to some degree in the next book a little bit. I think that there is an argument to be had about navigating the maze that Lysander's doing with, at the end of this, obviously at the end of the book, with Apollonius. So, yeah, I don't think you're right about him foreshadowing taking the reins, because he doesn't want the reins, right? Like but you said of some part, so I guess, like, the reality is that more than anything else, Apple wants to be the number one warrior of all time, right? Like, that's his sort of lust, what he seeks.
Like, arch-imperator,
and maybe an imperator. Maybe? Yeah, maybe, but I don't even know if that's it, because he's almost like more one-on-one than anything else, especially with his desires. So yeah, I don't know. I think I would argue that you're wrong and you should drink now, but I think that this is a holdover until we see the payoff.
Sounds good.
For where he would have landed, or where he should land.
Deal. I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, agreed. I think that this book poses a lot of questions for the next book, for sure. There's a lot. There's a lot that even unfolds in, like, the very last 10, 20 pages that it's like, what the... We lost an entire planet? Like, how did that happen? Fuck, we've been fighting for Mercury this whole book and we lost a planet in pages? Are you kidding me? Yeah, that's where my brain went. But so, the final prediction here, what's next for Lysander after his victory? How does Atalantia react? You said?
Atalantia wants power. She'll see Lysander as a threat to the claim of power, so I don't think she'll accept him with open arms. She'll be at odds, potentially to the point of being an actual enemy to Lysander. I don't know if I'm wrong yet.
Okay.
She literally planned an assassination for him. Like, I feel like that's pretty enemy territory right there.
But I feel like by the end of this, she's not fucking around with it anymore. She's committed, you know, because she sees the power gain. Especially because of the conversation with Kalendor, like that Kalendora has, where she saw Lysander as a chess piece on the board to be played, right? Yeah. And I think, and this is a conversation I think we'll have more later, but to some degree, I think that Kalendora could have been referencing either using Lysander's death as kind of like a martyrdom, you know, like a symbol, a martyr, so that she could perpetuate power, or now using him as a symbol of hope instead, combination of hope and fear. Yeah, so...
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't think that it's a threat any longer, unless Lysander starts acting up. Then it'll become threatening for his life.
Well, I think we'll get into this definitely later, but I don't think Lysander has innocent intentions with his betrothal. You know?
No.
I think there's something ulterior going on there, but yeah, we'll see.
Oh, man, for sure. So I think that's a drink for you. But again, I think that this is probably a holdover. So I think that all three of these questions will end up going with us into book 6 whenever it comes out. And we will definitely revisit them in whatever our intro episode ends up being to book 6. That way we just know what's going on. But yeah. So sweet. With that, let's get into the last chapters of Dark Age. Every time I'm saying this, like I'm getting like these little like, oh, this is the last time. Like this is the last time we're gonna like really talk about these folks for a long time.
Yep. Potentially. Maybe it'll come out tomorrow.
Yeah, it's not gonna come out tomorrow.
You don't know.
That's not how book marketing works. You're fired. So, chapter 87, Lysander Ghost. We open up this last section of the book with Lysander reflecting on war and the pain inflicted herein. But he almost uses them like excuses. He almost uses the whole thing as this sort of excuse. I could no more have stopped the bleeding than the Praetorians I left her with, but leave her I did, and there is little nobility in that. There is little nobility to any of this.
Yeah, at least in this moment, he kind of recognizes his lack of honor that we were pointing out last week. I don't really think that was ever lost on him, but at least he's making a note of it internally.
Yeah, I think it only becomes more exasperated later on, right? Like there's an entire section where he has post kind of reading in on Darrow and everything else. He has an even deeper reflection on honor being kind of completely a waste of time, which is so interesting. And we'll definitely talk a lot about that. But here at the very least, he reflects initially on the fact that like, I wasn't honorable. War isn't honorable. I don't need to be honorable. And it's like, well, you've been preaching a lot of honor. You've been a man of honor to your word, but now your actions are dishonorable. So of course you're stepping that way. Of course you're thinking that way.
Right.
It's a tough core point to follow for sure.
For sure.
Especially after, I mean, we've been reading this dude for 2 books now, right? Like he's only ever talked about like honor and like glory to some degree and sort of the glory to be had, to be earned. And obviously he was disillusioned of that early on in this book, but it really was still some semblance of a sticking point there that I kind of felt like he was working towards, but we really lose in the last section of this book where he's like, no. Not that being dishonorable is a good thing, but like honor is for the weak to some degree.
Yeah, it was a really interesting like turn and kind of out of nowhere, I felt like. And maybe it's not out of nowhere. Maybe it's just him internally justifying his actions.
I think it's that.
I think that makes more sense. But he has... So we talked about last week. I think it was last week. We talked about how Lysander, how his perspective on the other colors has changed in these last, really the last few sections. And someone today pointed out, one of our listeners pointed out that subsequent readings, in hindsight, he's been more consistent than we're like making him out to be. So I'd be interested in going back and seeing that, and furthermore applying that to his discussions on honor and whether or not he puts as much weight into it as we're making him out to.
So I think that's a really apt comparison because he definitely, this is kind of a side effect of the show, right? Which is what I brought up earlier to one of our patrons is talk about the books, but I obviously generally know more than you do, right? And so in the moment, our sort of reactions are on different pages. No more about the story, no more in general, PJ. We all know that you're smarter than I am. This is my one opportunity where I can just flex my creative thinking, writing, reading, media literacy muscles and have these kind of discussions. But outside of this arena, I often lose. But so I get to kind of have this sort of leg up on you, and rereading this, it became clearer earlier that he was more of a spacist, which is why I tried to like bring it up but not make it a big deal as we were going through. But I also couldn't oversell it or undersell it like we were kind of talking about last week, because I don't want to completely shape or jade your opinion. Yeah. I just want to acknowledge it enough so that the audience knows that, I'm not skipping over it.
And don't think it's lost on me, like how difficult of a job that might be for you. Like, I understand there's frustration.
PJ, I didn't spoil a single thing for 3,000 pages. Except for Harmony's name.
Yeah. Which, is that a spoiler? Hey, guess what? A new character gets introduced, and her name starts with an H as well.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not a fucking spoiler. So, yeah, that's it. Which is bonkers. Like, it's absolutely crazy that that we've gone this far without slip-ups. So, I commend you. Thank you. I appreciate you. And
Lysander is a spacist. Oh, okay. We went different directions with that.
Hey, I've got to knock you down sometimes.
That's a fair point. We're going to talk a lot more about Lysander's spacism in a bit here, but Lysander throwing down the Trophy of the Reaper's defeat, I think, is an excellent little moment for him. I say this, of course, not... There's this other component here too where it's like, guys, I don't really like Lysander. I like him as a character. I think he's an interesting perspective, but I don't actually like it. But it can still be well written and have me disagree with it. That's just a fact of writing. Like, that's just reality. But I think as it even floors Ajax, like it's just a glorious moment for him, right? I also enjoy that Cicero stands up for Lysander here, after beating him in the desert and kind of being, He was in Lysander's corner up until a point when it came down to the Praetorians and whatnot, but now he's like, dude's legit. I questioned him at first, but I believe. It almost gives me a God, is it John or Paul, the first apostle that follows Jesus? My brain is on this because of Midnight Mass, but anyway, point being, he's got his kind of first believer that believed in him early on. And, there's like a little bit of fealty there, like he's kind of reclaiming the Loon name.
Yeah, definitely. Really, really interesting moment. Tension from a lot of different perspectives. I just appreciated the silent rage that Ajax is clearly feeling in this moment. Mm-hmm. When all of his Praetorians like kneel to Lysander.
I mean,
gotta be
not
a little
only
masculine.
here, but for like the entire back half of this section, right? Like he is drunk and pissed and obviously irate with the whole situation. He loses his aunt with benefits. Like there's just a whole lot of shit.
Yeah.
Aunt with benefits is going to haunt me. The fact that I said that is just horrifying.
Aunt with benefits.
Oh no.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely a little.
Oy.
There's some gross shit all over the place that has to get untangled.
Yeah, we'll get there when we get there, because that's definitely a whole fucking conversation for sure. But, we were kind of talking about honor a little bit earlier, and it's going to feed throughout the conversation with Lysander, of course, but even Lysander recognizes that the victory that he won against Hera was a cheap one. It was kind of an honorless one. It wasn't a true test of each other whatsoever, and now that all of his role models he looked to or felled, they're dead, as he thinks, he can't help but repeat the oft whispered phrase, the bill comes at the end. They got what they deserved. They used cheap tricks and they had cheap tricks used against them, and it feels like a perversion of that phrase a little bit, like, yes, that is, they'll probably die, they could die similarly, but it just something about him using that phrase feels wrong to me in this context.
His fight with Darrow being cheap, this is where I think he's at odds with himself, because he's trying to rationalize his decision in a way that doesn't make him a fucking coward. Like he knows that he's not skilled enough to fight him one-on-one. Like, he's not skilled enough to fight him honorably. So instead, he takes down the entire idea of honor in his head, which is a little bit of a nuke and pave, but like, man, it's not, I don't know. He is kind of broken, I think. And we don't see the fracture so much. We just see the pieces getting put back together a little bit.
Yeah, it's the fracture of the decision and the fracture, I think, of his sort of turn towards the dishonorable is one that happened in the moment last week, when he was making the decision, realizing that he couldn't beat him one-on-one. And he makes the comment about, the equestrians and how Gold's, if one thing, they know how to ride horses, comparatively.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hold that over all of the colors. So, he acknowledges it in the moment, but in reflection, that's where he's starting to just now break down kind of his honor differential, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, fuck Lysander, but also glad to have this lens on the story. It'd be like, the way that I think about Lysander in a way is if we were able to sit in Vader's head and Vader's perspective for the 3 movies, to a degree.
Yeah, I think that
except for we
cool.
see a different heel turn, but we'll see. So our final scene of the chapter is witnessing the escape of the Archimedes with Darrow on board and Cassius flying away and escaping. They make eye contact and everything like that, and they clearly see each other and realize that one another are alive. I have a question for you about the last line here, though. My true heart is laid bare, awash with exultation, clouded with confusion, pure with purpose. The war goes on. I think this is an odd little phrase for Lysander, but I think it kind of fits the melancholy of his character in the moment while he's reflecting on sort of the loss of honor and how honor really doesn't exist as he thinks about it, because he's like, I couldn't win with honor. I had to cheat. Had he accomplished a mission he'd been seeking, he had just accomplished a mission he'd been seeking for an incredibly long time, but this sort of extension of the conflict, meaning that his enemies survived, he responds positively to, as though he suddenly has another opportunity to beat them honorifically. It's difficult to parse. What do you think?
I think there's a couple points to be made there. I think one is that he had been mourning Cassius for a long time, and maybe not out externally, but like clearly Cassius is somebody who raised him and somebody who truly influenced him. Mm-hmm. He talks about him in his monologues pretty regularly. And I would go as far as to say that he kind of sees him as a father figure of sorts. So there's that. So just being him knowing that Cassius is alive, I think probably pulls on a little bit of a string there towards the positive. And also in my head, he is doing everything he can actively to convince himself that honor isn't important. And this presents him an opportunity to regain some honor and not have to struggle against that anymore.
I think that that's a good point, because I think it does give him a release valve, right, where now he can make different decisions and he doesn't need to consider, to some degree, the honorifics of what he did, right? He's kind of given... He's like, oh, I didn't win. It wasn't dishonorable because I didn't kill him, but I'm still going to wear this victory proudly. So he kind of like has a chance for his own honorific redemption.
Right.
At the same time is also, kind of the exaltation of Cassius's, like you said, father figure being alive. I don't know.
That one's less rooted in any sort of contextual basis, but he talks about Cassius a lot. Doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he talks about Cassius pretty frequently. Like, he's definitely on his mind a decent amount, because he spent a decade with him. He spent as long with Cassius as he did with Octavia.
Yeah. So that even more, I think. Not that Octavia wasn't around when his parents were around, but how old was he when his parents were murdered?
How old was he when his parents were murdered? I want to say it was 6 or 7.
Okay, so he only spent like 3 years.
No, he was still being raised by Octavia, though. Like, was still a thing. Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking she took over the main, like, raising.
She definitely did, like, all the time. But,
okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
But still, the point still stands. Half his life was with Cassius. Mm-hmm. Teaching him things and really, truly effectively raising him. He was 10 years old.
Yeah, right.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, even we can also point at Pax, right? And like, Pax is a very well-educated 10-year-old and, or 11-year-old, I guess, 10, 11. So it becomes difficult to parse, like, obviously age in the future and sort of that impact, but...
It shouldn't, though, because... I guess it should. I guess you should take that into consideration, that they're no longer considered Homo sapiens, correct? I feel like that conversation is made at one point.
The conversation is made by a bunch of spacists, so it's not really a good... The people who have the conversation or who talk about it that way are the...
Board of Quality Control.
And Board of Quality Control and the Jackal are the two people who really have the conversation.
Okay.
So, like, don't take it with a grain of salt is kind of my thought on it. But
there's clearly, I guess, do we know, were golds genetically modified to be gold?
we know that learning is easier. We know that a lot of different things are easier because of technological advancements.
Bone
right?
density.
Like, bone density is higher, of course. Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things.
Like,
what's that?
To a ridiculous scale. Golds are fucking crazy. And were they, I guess my question is, were they evolved slowly and selectively chosen and like groomed to be this way, or were they carved?
Mostly groomed, but also there's no doubt that their genetics were messed with along the lines.
And there's
like
divergent...
it's a combination of the two. There's no good answer because there isn't an answer.
I would go as far to say, based on the fact that there are so many different traits based like among different colors, that they are effectively different species. All of the colors, I would say, are effectively different species, all diverging from Homo sapien.
Yeah, I mean, there's potential, right? Like the blues are really just more programmed to interface the way that they do. Reds are really just slaves. I would say that there are only a handful that are seriously different, that aren't just bred in different directions. But yeah, I can definitely understand enough about that. But I think it's neither. I think that's kind of neither here nor there on this question, if that makes sense. Like,
no, you're probably like, it's getting into the weeds. It's getting completely outside of the scope of the question. But we haven't had a conversation like this, like really in depth, in a long time.
Yeah, not since probably Morningstar, when it got called out at the beginning by the Jackal. Yeah. And that's where it kind of like, it was like, well, are they, aren't they? And I don't think that we have a clear answer. What I will say is that actually this is something we'll probably get into a little bit more in the prequel series. So, you know, obviously there's, without spoiling anything, what we know about kind of the way that the prequel series is, like we know the origin of Severo and that kind of thing. So there's going to be a little bit more of a genealogical discussion and sort of that kind of stuff. We'll see a little bit more of that. So
cool.
I can say that and have it not be a spoiler. So
sweet,
because we kind of know. We know the end result.
Yeah, that's fair.
Did you have any other thoughts on the Lysander Dario Cassius exchange interaction that happens?
So you mentioned them making eye contact, and for whatever reason, I don't remember that happening. I just remember him seeing the Archimedes and knowing that Cassius was alive.
So they specifically say, in what I imagine to be a very like Millennium Falcon-esque scene where like Han is standing on the landing platform and it's open as they're taking off, him standing there holding a pillar at the bottom of a landing platform and them making eye contact across the distance.
Okay.
It's very explicit, like it is.
I don't know how I missed that then.
A knight fills the open garage bay. It is not Darrow. His armor is brilliant white, his helmet like that of a rising sun. It retracts to reveal his face, and for a moment our eyes meet. Cassius. The door closes. The Archimedes ripples translucent from a cloaking device far more. Wait, where did it go? Wait. Oh, for a moment our eyes meet. Yeah. Duh.
Yeah.
I read it. Yeah.
Right.
I was like, did I skip it? Did I miss it? Did I imagine it? I was hallucinating after I read it. Okay. Well, yeah. So there you go. But it's, you know, it's a minor thing. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. No, it just caught me off guard when you asked the question because I didn't remember that, but that makes more sense. So.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. With that, we go into chapter 88, Lyria, our last Lyria chapter of the book. Lyria, Mercury has fallen. This chapter does a lot of exposition in a little amount of time. I would say a lot of these chapters actually do. You could almost write an entire book on all the shit that happens between point A and point B, especially from like Diomedes and Ajax's perspective. Like, you could write an entire novella about Earth and like the Earth combat that happens to take Earth inside of these like couple of days. Definitely a thing. Yeah. But for what it's worth, we've spoken about the brothers a lot. We actually had a whole like phone call conversation. We talked about it before the show. We talked about it during the show, about whether or not they were like identical, or is it referring to the three of them, or is it, you know, it was a very like on and off conversation. But I had a couple of different people come out of the woodwork, and it's only been at this point 48 hours from release, who are like, hey, those men, those boys, those dudes, those Reds were Lyria's brothers. And I went, oh, shit. Of course they were, because two of them look alike, and the third is the brother-in-law that went away. We've got Dagon, Angus, and Varen.
Did we know their names at that point?
We did. Yep. We
fuck,
know
how the fuck did we miss that?
Right. And like the names are brought up like all the way back in the origin of Iron Gold, and like the names aren't said when Darrow's talking to them. Like he doesn't mention the names, but obviously like it seems like a very clear point of dramatic irony for us to shift from perspective to perspective and be like, oh, two brothers and a third one who acknowledges that he's a brother but doesn't look like the other. Okay, well that's logically the two brothers and the brother-in-law. Yeah,
no, that makes sense logically. I thought you were telling me that it explicitly said their names.
Oh, no. Did not explicitly say the names. I'm repeating the names for those who don't remember.
I mistook trying to like convey that these are important people to another character as these are important people because shit's going down and they're going to like turn. Like,
yeah,
I took it the way stupid like conspiracy theorist route and didn't even consider the fact that Lyria had brothers here.
This was the typical dramatic irony of which we knew that Lyria had brothers that were in war, and then we get kind of an update that we think that we know that they're in Heliopolis because that's where they were stationed when last she heard post the Iron Rain. So, all the way back in Iron Gold. So, like, logically, this makes sense that those three snipers are here. And the hope and the assumption is that they make it out or they survive or whatnot. But as we learn, a very limited number of people actually make it out of of this whole conflict. So
I would like to be clear that even if they did mention their names, would have been lost on me. Like, I wasn't paying attention to the names. I was just hunting for intent. And I was like laser focused on some sort of negativity because that just seems to follow Darrow fucking everywhere. So even if it was laid out entirely that these are their names, fucking would have missed it,
Yeah,
so,
fair point.
I'm glad people pointed it out because I think even now, without that, I would have been lost on it.
That's fair. Good point. So with that actually moving into the chapter itself, the funeral for Ulysses is really tough. It's obviously a hard moment, I think, especially for Victor and Electra, but especially because Severo is missing here as well. There's obvious pain, and the Julii ritual of the swimming to the sun is obviously a fascinating one, obviously very emotionally resonant, but it does also have an odd resemblance to me of that of the Ra family and walking to the sun grave, kind of upon death. Obviously, there's a difference or not upon death, but, upon approaching death. It's definitely an interesting kind of thing, the way that Golds do death rituals. What'd you think? What do you make of it?
So, very interesting ritual. And I think, I don't know if I really like the comparison to the Ra ritual, because that is somebody choosing to die and trying to get somewhere in the throes of it. Whereas this is a remembrance kind of thing. And furthermore, the Julii are very, very strong people, physically, mentally, and exteriorly, like on the exterior, emotionally. And we've obviously seen some emotion peek through because we've been very, very close to Victra for a couple books. But
don't forget that Antonia was a Julii.
I know, but we didn't see her get emotional very often, did we?
No, yeah, she just got murdered in Morningstar, so it's fine.
So solitarily swimming to the horizon allows for solitude in personal reflection, whatever emotional outbursts might happen, on top of physical catharsis. Like, fuck, I've gone and cried during swim practice before for that exact reason. I don't know if you have, but I definitely used swimming as like a place to just let my emotions out when I didn't want to share it with people. And then there's the added ritual of swimming back if and only if there's a light to guide you home. I mean, sometimes not even then, but that silently allows family members and friends to show their support for those people that are grieving. Like, I love the ritual. I think it's perfect for that family. I think they'd be healthier if they let their emotions out and showed some semblance of weakness sometimes when it's necessary and when it's needed, or when it's appropriate, without changing the way that their sort of emotions work. This is an amazing ritual. I really like it. This struck me. This more than there were a couple scenes in this last section, and honestly, the only scenes in the book, the only scenes in the series that really got me to like feel and almost tear up. This was one of them for that reason. I really loved it.
Okay, multifaceted breakdown. So I'm going to start from the beginning, work towards the end. First up, so we've got three different parts. One, we've got the breakdown comparison of Romulus and this, and sort of the raw versus Barca fashion. And I think you're right. I think that it isn't perfectly apt to compare the two, because one is the person striking out on their own at the end of their life, choosing to kind of pursue this path because they know that they're going to die. And then the other is sort of a celebration of life in its own right, and sort of a live grieving process. And they are different, but they both being gold familial rituals. The similar, like, one is a pursuit of grief, or one is a grief relief valve, and the other one is sort of honorific, where everyone else grieves, which is interesting. Not a good direct comparison, but I think that it's, at least worth kind of mentioning and comparing. I mean, we've only seen so many gold funerals. It's either that or shot into the sun.
Right.
So that's one point. Second point, regarding swimming in general, I definitely agree with you. I think one of the most interesting things about being a swimmer versus running versus biking versus anything else is swimming. You can buy waterproof headphones. You can listen to music, but in general, it's generally just you and your thoughts. Like, it is literally just you and whatever is going on in your head. And that is cathartic in some ways. It can be anxiety inducing in others. It can be a stress release valve. Swimming it's kind of like a deprivation tank, but like, you're not completely deprived of all senses. So that's the way that I've always thought about it. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that swimming is a wonderful emotional release valve for a number of reasons. You really kind of focus in on yourself and your brain to that point. And then the third point that I had on this was the sort of emotional moments throughout the series. And I definitely agree with you. This one hurts because you can see kind of the intent and the pain and sort of the fight that she goes throughout this section to go swim out and then later show up, swim back, and immediately go into training because she feels this desire for vengeance and this sort of pain, this crafted, and she just has embraced that and understands what she has to do next. And that's like resolve on a level few other characters in any story that I've ever read have shown.
Yeah.
So, I mean, phew. Fuck yeah, Victra. Always been a favorite, but like, especially after this book.
Yeah. Going off of that sort of comment, this almost makes me want a, like, Lyria, or not Lyria, Victra.
I thought you were going to say a child.
No. Fuck no.
I was afraid. Anyway, continue.
A point of view from Victra.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think this is better. Not seeing her internal thoughts, I think is better. I like it more. I don't know if we'd get the same sort of. I don't think I would get the same evocation of feelings now.
If it was
POV. in her point of view. I'm sure we'd get something more out of it, but I think seeing her go off on her own and just not knowing what's going on in her head, it lets me explore that a little bit more.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, and I think that that's one of the things that I really liked about the first trilogy when we were thinking about Virginia, Mustang as well, is that it was always Darrow's perspective on what Mustang is thinking. And I'm not saying that we lost anything by gaining Mustang's perspective. Matter of fact, I think we gained a lot on the story, but it does change the perspective, because you can, in a character that you're not in the POV in, you're allowed to speculate a lot more on what they're thinking. So
right, exactly.
I totally feel that. Yeah, it's emotionally resonant in a ton of ways, and if nothing else, this book strengthens my love for Victra undoubtedly,
wholeheartedly.
And like, you know, she got introduced as a character in like the very intro of Golden Sun, and she was like kind of shitty, and she's the, you know, sister of Antonia, and she turns out to be the most loyal, hardest, craziest badass like ever. When we were talking back back with Howler Pod in our wrap up episode for the original trilogy, the reason that Aaron and I both were like Victra, and then I was like, wait, I have to change. It's because I was like, I can't actually make my full argument yet. And now it's very clear why my full argument exists, because she's a very compassionate person, despite coming off as this like sarcastic hard ass. And, you know, she's very intense, but that intensity has serious intent behind it. You know, it's just, yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure.
Love Victra. Whew, all right. That was a long one, but worth it. So, and just like that, Volga is gone, off to rescue Ephraim, which we know there's nothing left to be saved. And she finds that out quickly, that there is little left of him as well. The reflection on death throughout this chapter of both Ephraim and Ulysses is really, really potent. Revenge, debts, and the like are definitely a characteristic that we're seeing brought up again and again throughout Victra, Lyria, and Volga. What do you make of this? Of course, like, death has been a theme and a characteristic of the story, but now we're kind of living in the grief for a second.
I think it's not only a theme, it's also what's tied Lyria, Volga, and Victra together. And
I mean, now it certainly has. Like, well, definitely.
I mean, but just in general, like, maybe Victra gets tacked on later, but Volga and Lyria kind of get tied together through hardship. All of it's tied through hardship, and man, I don't know where to go with this. It's just heartbreaking, you know? But it also means that we got to see their growth. And we talked a lot about their growth, and hardship is what has brought all of that forward. And they are absolutely better characters for it. They're better people for it. If I want to like sink myself out of the scope of looking at it as book characters, like, they're better people for having shared these losses and shared this death. Ephraim and Ulysses are just more, where they get to support each other, and they get to lean on each other, and they get to harness these losses as fuel for their vengeance campaigns.
Yeah, and you know, like you said, this really kind of pushes them together. That's a huge component here. I think that by and large, Volga wasn't so much initially, but now she's got the same drive as the other two. I mean, obviously, Lyria has been fighting for the death of her sister and her nephews and nieces and brother, of whom were all killed at the hands of Harmony or the Red Hand. Victra, of course, also lost Ulysses to the Red Hand, and Volga was fighting for the two of them because she's positively spirited, but now she's empowered by that same rage to go after.
Yep.
I think you bring up a great point. I think that that's something we will definitely be exploring in the next book. My curiosity, this is just, you know, bonus here. Do you think, given what we know about Pierce and everything else, and given the way the story's flowing, do you think we'll get Volga as a POV?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good question. Yes, I think we will.
I think we kind of have to, right?
I think we have to. And strangely, honestly, I hope it's Ephraim's voice actor. For the audiobook.
Because you just liked her voice?
I liked how he did
his impression
Volga.
Of her voice.
I really like how he did Volga. Lyria's did an okay job, but I think Ephraim's was better. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yes, I think we kind of have to. I think we need, because she's going off separately, and that is going to be our primary source of any sort of information on Volsung Fa.
Right. So we have to have some kind of interaction, even if it's not, it doesn't need to have the same weight as other POVs and whatnot, but I still feel like it'll be critical to entangle us with that side of the story.
Yeah.
Speaking of course, Volga's departure stings, dude. It sucks. It's the right move in many ways, as it appears, but I can't imagine walking into the jaws of that terrifying cultural monstrosity that is the Obsidians under Volsung Fa. Like, this is... Yeah, she's the inheritor of the throne. She's the inheritor of the title. She's the daughter of Ragnar and Hrothga, of whom we get named here. But it's not... I can't
actually imagine that Fa is thinking she'll come without any sort of ulterior motive.
Because he's an agent of the Fear Knight, like he's...
Yeah, but also, he's intelligent. He knows, he knows about her, so I'm sure he knows what she's been up to.
Right.
So I can't imagine he just thinks, oh yeah, she'll come, work for me. That's not what he's planning. My genuine thought is that he's going to use her, like Ragnar was used, as sort of the breeding grounds and the source of new monsters for his ranks. That's my thought. He's going to enslave her as a monster farm.
I think he's gonna try to manage as best he can, and I feel like a part of his plot is going to be trying to capture Lyria with her, and then them turning against him collectively. That feels in my brain, because he wants her to sacrifice something to break her down, right? So my thought is okay, how do you break Lyria? You break her by killing the one person that she cares about, or one of the two people that she cares about in the world right now, which is Lyria or Victra.
You said, how do you break Lyria? You mean Volga?
Sorry, how do you break Volga down? You kill Lyria, or you make her kill Lyria. So I think that it might become a hunt to the Oculus, and then maybe they turn on him at that point.
Okay, I can see that.
But I do understand your kind of point on will he believe her, and I think it'll be his intent is kind of the long game, and she's thinking, regardless of the long game, you can't make up for actually killing my real father, even if you are my grandfather. By real father, I mean Ephraim, not Ragnar.
Yeah.
I miss Ephraim so much, dude. Every time I'm just I want my dose of humor. I want my dose of cynicism.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yep.
So much for him coming back to life, right? We
don't know yet.
He's toast, dude. There's no way.
I mean, they've got his body parts. What's left of him?
They buried him. He's dead and gone.
They refer to him as barely pieces, right?
She cradles him. Volga cradles him, and then when she stands up, he falls apart in her arms.
Yep.
That's...
Yeah, okay, we saw his body. He's not dead yet.
He's super dead.
He's dead. He's not... There's no question now.
Yeah.
He's dead. But, I mean, he can be reanimated.
Not reanimated. No one's been reanimated. The Abomination...
No, I know.
God, of which I didn't even write a question about, should have. But the Abomination is not the same as Adrius, even, at its core. So...
That's true.
Yeah. Oh, man. So our chapter ends with a conversation between Lyria and Pax setting up what could be their story in the next book. And the simple line at the end of the chapter is, have you ever heard of a city called Oculus? And, we've heard a little bit about Oculus. Yeah, we have.
We have heard a little bit about Oculus. Yeah, so that Lyrostes built Oculus. Did you hear how hard I had to figure out how to say his name?
I hope all of our listeners hear how hard you did that. Oh my god.
I was literally biting my lip trying to figure out how to actually say it, because
in the notes
it's not natural for me at this point yet.
I still have Gil written in the notes as opposed to Gliss.
Yes, you do. I write
literally.
Gil every time. And Gil
you did
space.
write it correctly.
And then I have to delete it and write Glirostes. Because what the fuck?
Oh my god, that's funny.
Because
Anyway,
I was like, all right, fucking perfect. I can just annotate this as Gil. And I don't have to write his whole fucking name in my notes. And nope, that's wrong. Glee.
You wrote him as Glee.
Glee doesn't look that good.
Glit.
Glit. Fucking.
It's the sound of like a fish drowning on air, like
Glit.
glit. It's the one torsal of their gills moving. Oh man. Anyway, sorry, my bad.
No, you're good. That's apt. We know he built the city of Oculus. My assumption was it was something for PAX because of some quote. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head.
About a kid, or about like children waking up inside of the city and having no concept outside of what's in front of them. So like they're, that was where we brought up the cave originally when we discussed kind of the concept of this utopia.
Yeah, something like that. But this is now making me wonder, did Glirostes create Figment, or was he tasked by Figment to create a city for it?
Well, so multifaceted answer here. So first off, it is Glirostes' city by design. Glirostes city by design. But it was commissioned by Quicksilver, right? So my mental argument is that this is Quicksilver. And I would just exchange in your phrase Quicksilver, Phil, for Glirostes, right? Like, this is obviously designed by Quicksilver. There are obvious intentions. Does that also mean, because Quick has been searching for this, as we learn, and there's a bounty out for the parasite as well, the Figment, how does Quicksilver factor into the story? How does Quicksilver factor into this?
So I guess at that point, Quicksilver isn't in the position to create something like that, as far as we understand. Maybe funded it, but didn't create Figment himself.
Oh, yeah, okay. Right.
So I could see him funding it.
But it's not his brainchild.
But that kind of pulls out the rug from my idea of maybe Glirostes invented and created Figment.
I mean, maybe. So. He did say, as he mentioned, like he did say that he was a genius, right? And that like he thought that he could cure the poison and was going to work on it. That's what he like left to work on amid everything else. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So with that, any other thoughts on Lyria? That's the last time that we talked to her. That's kind of it for the most part.
She has come so far. She is almost entirely a different character. And that's great. Like, it was so cool to see this character arc and this growth. We've talked a lot about her growth and her progression, but she is far from the person that we met her as.
Yeah, she definitely is very far off from the person that we met her as. And I think in a lot of ways she's grown and matured, and in other ways she's finally been able to take agency in her own perspective and kind of claim the world as her own, move against the baddies as it were. Yeah, so yeah. I feel that. With that, we move into chapter 89, Lysander, Triumph of the Long Night. So the Long Night, of course, is a reference directly to the conflict of which just happened, the previous night's conflict on Mercury. The conversation that we start off with between Glirostes and Lysander is a good one, I think, as it allows for a proper reflection on what Lysander will need to do to actually survive now that he's truly in the society's political sphere. As he says, "After all, I am the best kind of hero, harmless, and you are the worst, young with a name." I enjoy as well that he's talking to Apollonius, assuming that he's around, and likely that he hasn't been far away this whole time, as though he's been kind of like stalking them. But yeah, I mean, the conversation with Glorastes is a big deal for sure that happens here and very revelatory.
So as far as the conversation with Apollonius goes, I really like to think that he's just been floating around Lysander the whole, like, this half of the book. But we kind of know that can't be the case due to the EMP, right? Like, his cloaking device would be fried and his grav boots would be fried, which is how we left him. Like, that's the last we saw of him. So to see him almost as like a god figure to Lysander here is kind of weird, you know? Like, he's almost praying to him, assuming he's there.
Yes, yeah, to Apollonius. It's odd because part of this is almost, do we think that Lysander is seeing him because of the mind's eye? Do we think that there's something else to this? You know? So it's definitely hard fought, but not 100% on what exactly it is. But it does kind of seem like praying in that way. You're right.
Yeah, it's odd. I like it though.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any other thoughts on the sort of Glorastes' impact over the course of this chapter? In my own context, we're not going to talk about him for most of the rest of this, but you know, what do you think about like his decision to like change the cart, to kind of make all these provisions and like make the armor, present the crescent, spray painted all over the place? He's like his primary propagandist in a way, you know? I
don't trust him.
You don't trust Glorastes?
I don't trust him even from Lysander's perspective.
Interesting.
Like, okay. The armor or the uniforms, it is hand waved and just said, oh no, the actual uniforms were missing, so I commissioned these instead. And it just felt so dismissive in a way that wasn't, I don't know, it just seemed off. And I don't know where I put Glorastes in the like alliance sort of chart, but I don't think he's aligned entirely with Lysander. I don't think he's aligned at all with Darrow. Like there's something fucky with him, and I don't know what it is, but I am not sure.
I get a bit of a different read. I think that he's entirely aligned with Lysander, but that anyone else he does not give a shit about. Like he cared predominantly about Mercury. And he cared predominantly about Heliopolis and the population, which is why he was working with Darrow, because he thought that he would preserve the population, and that was going to be the way that he could protect the most people. He was doing the right thing by his own moral standards. He then shifts in like onto almost a back foot when Lysander reappears, and he's like, oh fuck, these people that I like was revered by and loved for and like all this shit, they're back? Well, I actually care about the loons. I don't care about the grimaces because they're just warlords. I don't care about Atalantia at all. But the loons always respected me, so maybe I'll give that a bit more weight. In particular, because he's at the top of the societal rung. So like he is one of the highest oranges that exists. So why wouldn't he bounce right back into the arms of the people who loved and respected him and treated him, you know, as highly as possible, especially after he feels betrayed by the overextension of the storm gods and the damage that they wrought on Mercury, you know?
Yeah.
That's a lot, but that's my thought.
No, that's totally fair. Why the caginess about the uniforms then?
He's not really I don't think he's being cagey about the uniforms.
Isn't the right word, but he's hand wavy about it.
Well, he's just being like, stop fucking worrying about it, dude. Like, I have your back. And I think that's his kind of whole attitude about this whole thing. Like, in case you didn't realize, I just helped you execute one of the greatest, like, combination defeats, routing of one of the biggest military leaders of all time. Like, I am firmly in your corner. Here's your reminder that I'm in your corner. I'm so in your corner that I built you your own cart because the other one could have been sabotaged. Like, I'm so here for you.
Yeah, I don't know.
And maybe that is so honorific. Maybe that's just so much for you that becomes an overbearing point. But for me, that just becomes very clear that Glorastes appreciates the loons more than anything else, like he did before, as he wears that badge of honor that he was given by Octavia forever ago. You know, like there's clearly something there.
We are in this really strange position where we've had like discussions like this before where we're at odds with what each other thinks. And right now, I know that what you're arguing isn't rooted in anything in the future.
It's true. I'm just arguing on over-analysis of past events. That's the difference, is I've read this so many times.
So but, you trust him, and I don't. You trust his external
facade. Yeah, his face.
Perception. Yeah. You trust that, and I don't, is kind of what we're getting at. And this is the first time where we've had an argument like this, or I wouldn't even call it an argument. I wouldn't call it a disagreement. We've had a conversation like this where we're at opposite ends of it. I'm not trying to figure out if you are just trying to fuck with me or if you're genuinely at odds.
Oh man!
So
I've actively tried to stop fucking with you for a while now. For
I know,
the record.
I know,
like,
but I still think
that's been
that
a big thing since Golden Sun. Is it's like I'm not really trying to mess with you anymore because the book does enough of that.
I know. But that was just kind of an epiphany for me. Like, this is the first time we've had a conversation like that where I genuinely don't have to worry about that. Exactly.
Like, all I have is just more experience, more page time. You know, like this is technically, including the audiobook listen at this point, like the fourth time through, but that's because I've like triple read it this time to do all the prep. So,
right.
Yep. Yeah. It's definitely a whole thing. So
it's fun though. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. We didn't resolve anything, but it was a fun conversation.
Fair enough. So the poisoning of Kellandora, man, Lysander, you are so fucking naive to believe that Darrow would ever stoop to using poison. Has he ever done something like that? There's never been a moment in which he has stooped so low as to poison somebody or to go behind someone back. He's been honorific in combat for so long, at the very least since the Institute. In like maybe the one super underhanded moment was the dead horses, but like even that was still single combat for the most part. I don't know. Our only examples so far of poisoners, of course, are Atalantia and Apollonius. So, like, come on, dude. You don't have to look much further than the people you're around.
Yeah. So
you're choosing to lie with.
I think I was confused. My first read through of this, I was entirely like,
his conviction convinced you, or like,
yeah. He was so sure that Darrow's razor was like dipped in poison or something. Like, that's what he says, right? There was poison applied through Darrow's razor, and he was so convinced of it that I didn't question it that much. I'm like, that's fucking weird, but I don't. Maybe I missed something in the battle scenes, and it was just odd for me. But now, thinking about this again right now, as you're asking this question, we know Glorastes. Fuck, I did it too. He's out looking for an antidote, basically, because he's a genius. Has he been, and is he, and has he been aligned with Atalantia the entire time? Like, would this EMP have gone off regardless? Like, did he actually turn with the arrival of Lysander? I don't think so.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no question.
I don't think so. No,
he was 110% in Darrow's camp.
Nah, I don't. Yeah. With this, I don't think so. Because he's so adamant about, I can find a cure for this. And that's not his bag. That's not his bag at all. He's not a medica.
The poison is what made you think that?
Just right now, when we're talking about it right now. Like, I'm just thinking about this right at this very moment. The poison and the fact that he is so sure and so, like, adamant on convincing Lysander that he can solve this problem makes me think that he is just there to pacify Lysander.
I think it's just sheer hubris. Like, the dude has never been... Yeah, I mean, that's just he
didn't have that much time to alter his, like, designs with the EMP. He didn't have that much time at all.
He had like 5 days, and I
don't
know
that much time.
dude's a genius, and like built the biggest EMP of all time. You know, like I don't know, man.
But he was always such a
dude.
dick to the. He was a dick to the Rising in general.
No, but he was supporting them.
Yes, he was supporting them, but he was requiring like sardines on Tuesdays. Yeah, like he was just being a dick.
I don't know if it's being a dick so much as it is like being
absolutely
like
being a
priss.
dick. You can
like there's a difference between like being an asshole for being an asshole's sake and like being an artist. You know what I mean? Like
it literally said he wouldn't work if he didn't get his
correct. Because he's an artist.
Sardines.
He's not a dick by like just like I won't like being a dick is like bring me this or else. Like it's more of a threat. You know what I mean? And like
let me put this forward right now. Like my official statement, and hold me to this for
sure.
I will shotgun a beer if I'm wrong. Any beer of your choosing. Any beer of your choosing, as long as it can be
we might go with
shotgunned.
stout.
So it's a can. It's got to be a can. I will shotgun a beer on video or on
it'll be on
the
video.
podcast if I'm wrong in this.
Los Dos.
But I am putting forward right now Glorastes is in Atalantia's pocket and he's playing Lysander just as he was playing Darrow. Like he had been in their pocket the entire time. And that EMP would have gone off the same way it already did.
Whether
or not Lysander showed up.
This is I've never disagreed with you more on something in this podcast than this moment in which I'm like there's no way. But I will take your shotgun beer bet.
This gauntlet. Are you agreeing to the same terms? If I'm wrong or if I'm right, will you do the same?
So here's my problem. It's very difficult to film me shotgunning a beer because there are two things that happen. Either I finish it or I puke because carbonation.
So, what about just how can
I could probably do an ice? Like I could do an ice that has a low enough carbonation where I can generally handle it.
How about as quickly as possible you chug a beer of my choosing?
Sure. Whatever. Fine. Yeah.
Also in a can. Same constraints.
You heard it here first, folks. We're betting on Glorastes in the future. And if this doesn't resolve, we need you to resolve it for us. We're going to hold ourselves accountable. If this doesn't resolve in the next book, you guys make the judgment call on who you think is more correct.
Yeah. Call us. Let us know when you've
call a spade and spade, and just remind me that I'm right.
No. So are we limiting it to beer? Let's get into the depths of the
oh my God.
of the wager. Strictly beer or anything canned?
I would say let's just stick to beer.
Stick to beer. Okay.
Ugh. Yeah.
And obviously for you, it's got to be canned. I'm going to stick to that same requirement for me.
Yep.
Choosing for you when you're wrong. Okay, cool. I might be.
My God.
All right. Sorry for that.
Oh, all right.
Divergence.
Well, yep.
But yeah, no, I don't fucking trust him.
We were talking about Calendora, and you derailed to Glorastes and the poisoning and the solution there. Do you have any other thoughts? Who do you think poisoned Calendora? It's just, we'll put it straight up.
I guess who actually physically poisoned her?
Or who's responsible for the poisoning?
Atalantia. Of course it's Atalantia.
Okay. All right.
Especially knowing that Lysander's here and knowing the history of Lysander and knowing the role that Calendora played in that history. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Fucking kill her. Get that possibility out of the way. So
get that thing back where it came from, or so help me. Put it in the void, please.
Something like that.
Yeah, right. I couldn't agree more. Okay, all right. Just had to clarify since we went so far off the rails on that question. I'm wondering as well. We speculated on this a while ago, but the symbols on the spines of the books. I wonder if we'll see a pyramid with the crescent on it, given Glorastes' sort of penchant for putting this on everything and kind of using that design. We see on Iron Gold, seeing the 12-pointed Star of the Republic. We see on Dark Age the grimace triangle with the skull in the center. I'm curious if we'll see the Lune Crescent or if we'll see the rim symbol on the edge.
So, I think if I were to guess, it'd be some sort of eye for the Oculus. That'd be my guess. But you bring up a point. You will bring up a point later on. I was reading through the notes. You will bring up a point later on about not comparison to Morningstar. There's another
right, yeah. Lightbringer, Morningstar, Lucifer. Right.
So Lightbringer with a crescent. Morningstar already is a crescent on its side.
Yeah.
Lightbringer with a crescent would be very evocative of that. I don't know if it's too much so. I could see it happening. But I really think it'll be something with Oculus.
Okay. All right. I can see that. I just feel like it'll account for the three sides of the war. I'm pro actually the rim symbol being there first and foremost, but with sort of the tentative title of Lightbringer being out there, I am curious as to whether or not it'll be, something else. So, I just wanted to bring it up. I thought that was an interesting symbol, and I think that it accompanies kind of our suite of symbols that we've talked about previously. So, I want to bring it up.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, every time Atlas speaks, I am on the edge of my fucking seat. When he's here in the cart with him, I love it, but I also love to hate him. Like he's a vile but interestingly morally complex dude that I need more of. Strictly, I just need more.
Atlas is so well spoken throughout this entire book, but obviously here as well. Everything that he says has some sort of rationalization to it. Although, terrifying and angering and just upsetting, it's so satisfying to read it, Yeah. Strangely, I'm not rooting for him, but I love his character.
Yeah, I do also love his character, and it's you don't want to root for the dude, like you said, but he is
it's
a
not
delightful villain.
It's not rooting for him, but it is. I am hoping that he survives long enough to give me more of this,
Yeah, kind of this. He's got an interesting haunt about him, there's something inexplicable about him as a villain, and I'm so wanting of more of this. That's what actually shocked me the most in this read through was my desire for more Atlas.
Yeah I missed him, especially in this later section of this book. I wanted more because he's so fun to read.
Yeah, and I love Apollonius. I do actually I'm appreciative later that we get Apollonius, but I think that they make interesting counterpoints to each other to a degree. They're their own foils in their own way. Do you know what foil means in a story?
I mean, not antagonist, but undoing almost.
No, a foil is a character that supports another, be it directly or indirectly. Indirect might be thematically, another might be more directly as though he's a supporting character. Fleshes out the other character's traits, right? So I'm going to cut that, but I think that he's a fantastic foil, right? Because they are in a lot of ways opposite. Apollonius is the definition of absurdity and of a grotesque appetite, and Atlas is this very reserved, conscientious, step-by-step plotting thinker. That's why they're foils to each other, is because they are opposites, but they are working towards very similar goals,
right?
Which just makes them fantastic, I think, in a lot of ways. So
yeah. I don't know what it is. I love Atlas so much more than I love Apollonius. I don't know what it is. He seems so much more rooted and so much more, I don't want to say relatable, but realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas Apollonius is almost a caricature of a villain, you know? I don't know. That's not the right way to put it.
Right. I understand. I'm not going to try to nitpick caricature, but I get what you're getting at, right? Like, Apollonius feels he's not even archetypical, right? Because an archetypical or like a regular villain doesn't desire lust in the same way that he does after his targets or his task. So like, yeah, I get you. I think I get what you're digging at or pointing at, and I think we can expose that more when we get to Apple's section here.
So
but,
I think I know what I want to say, or
sure.
how I want to put it. Apollonius is an extraordinary villain, whereas Atlas is someone that, like, you could believe that he'd just be in society undetected.
He's mild-mannered, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he is strangely, right? Especially for all the violence and, like, his psychological torture and everything like that. Like, collectively, he's... And I say this after I read the very grotesque poem last week. Very, like, he's fairly mild-mannered, except for when he's not. And then it's like, whoa. Are you holding this inside all the time? Or, like, are you just using this as a tool for psychological manipulation? And that's really where I think some of the lines blur with Atlas versus Apollonius. So
I'm not being super, like, articulate in my differentiation between the two, but there's a clear difference in my head about why I gravitate towards Atlas as opposed to Apollonius in my, like, what do I want out of a villain sort of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of answers it, but
sure.
not perfectly. It's so hard to put to words. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. So I want to put out a couple of different thoughts now. Moving on from these two, we'll get to talk about more about Apollonius and even a little bit more about Atlas a bit later here. But speaking about the Lightbringer thing and kind of the battle cry of the Lightbringer being sung here, it's a song about Selenius and sort of the past of the Loons and everything else. We briefly mentioned the Luciferian connection between Morningstar and Lightbringer and kind of the sort of, we didn't really talk about it, but like the fall of Lucifer is kind of a big component here, right? And there's an argument in my head, with this being a potential placeholder title, that the morning star that fall, like, obviously Darrow is the morning star that everyone's pointing to, the Tir Morga, and kind of everything else is as it goes forward. But rise so high in mud you lie, and man, it's tough to kind of disconnect the imagery here that those two potential titles evoke against each other, and even the song of the Lightbringer versus the, like, let's just say in the next book, Lysander is referred to as the Lightbringer and Darrow is referred to as the Morningstar, right? Like, they're both different sides of the same Luciferian coin in their own way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and I love that dichotomy between the two of them. I can't imagine, like, there are other book name options here, but Lightbringer feels like the winner.
It does. I wonder if it's too similar to Morningstar. Maybe not.
In what way? I was going to say, like, not everyone's going to draw that connection.
Yeah,
like,
that's a fair point. Nobody would really immediately draw that connection without already understanding the differences.
The one other point, the one problem that I do have with the title Lightbringer is that it's not two words like everything else is. Like, Iron Gold is two words, Red Rising, Morning Star, Golden Sun, Dark Age. You know, Lightbringer being one word is
it's one word, but it's said as two words.
Yeah, right. I would agree.
So
with that.
I don't think that's super important to, like.
That's my one. That's just my one gap.
Constrain yourself to.
Yeah.
Lightbringer would be good. I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah. Just wanted to bring that up. You know, we talked about it a little bit earlier. So, of course, Lysander bestowing the rank of Dux upon Roan is, I think, a really good thing for him, as it shows that respect and honor that he's earned through loyalty to the family Loon. It's a nice reward for all the effort that he's put in over the years and the faith that he's placed in kind of everyone.
This for me was a little bit. I took this question kind of in a jaded way, I guess.
Like every question?
Like most questions, I guess. Is Roan going to be his token lower color going forward? Like, no, I can't be spaces. Look at my ducks. They're usually gold, but he's a gray. Look how interesting I am. Look how inclusive I am. I don't trust it.
That does seem very,
Especially because he brought up the fact that it's usually gold in his conversation with Roan.
He didn't, he brought it up in his own head for us, but I would,
Oh, was it? It was
not out loud. It was not out loud.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was, it was definitely brought up, to us.
Yeah. I don't know.
He equated the position to Aja, right? So, like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it just seems, especially based on his internal thoughts about the lower colors, this seems like a way of justifying his own feelings and actions without labeling himself as a spacist.
Yeah, and it's not as though he's trying to be a reformer, right? Like, he's not saying that low colors need more rights or, like, deserve more rights by any stretch.
That's exactly what I'm saying, is that this gives him, in his mind, in my thought, like, my understanding of this and my read on this is that in his mind, this gives him kind of carte blanche ability to do whatever he wants to sort of subjugate the lower colors without that much scrutiny, because one of his high-ranking officials is not gold.
I think you're right? I do think that you're dialing into something that he is trying to play into, maybe in the long run, when he's thinking about bringing all of the Republic back into the fold with less bloodshed. He's like, I love lower colors. Look at my number one in command this whole time, Roan T. Flavinius, the number one gray. Even before he was the Ducks. But, this sort of additional title is one of honor for sure. And I can't think of anyone who deserves it more, like, I don't know. It's tough because, like, Roan is a good dude. He's just a good dude on the wrong side, which is unfortunate.
Right. Exactly.
It sucks, but what can you do? Atlas, of course, being on the cart with Lysander is an interesting moment, as it lets them share a couple of intimate exchanges, but of course, it's the last one that gets me after they get off the cart. Remember, you are but mortal. The Stoic classic, Memento Mori. And seemingly this time, more of a warning about Atalantia, that one of strict pride, thinking about, kind of the reaction that she might have to him, the assassination attempt that obviously happens. It almost comes off as like a play your cards right, as opposed to the earlier reference that happened with Darrow and Severo on the stairs at the beginning of Iron Gold during a triumph as well. Kind of comparing those two moments where he was like, just remember, dude, you're mortal. And he's like, fine. Darrow was kind of shaking it off. And now Lysander, it's almost a warning. It's an interesting juxtaposition of a couple of different moments that's happened throughout the story. Yeah.
So that was the same term used, right? Like
correct. They both.
Severo did say that, almost not exactly the same necessarily.
No, he said, "Remember, you are but mortal."
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly, which is Memento Mori.
Yeah.
Translated to English.
Right. Yeah. For sure. I feel like there was a time between Lysander and Atlas that something similar was said as well. And maybe it was just more stoic conversations, but I feel like we've talked about it. Like in this book. I can't remember. I really can't remember. But God, it's a good parallel. Everything between Darrow and Lysander is such a good parallel to make. And it makes for such a cool... Is it ironic at this point? I don't think so. Just a mirror of Darrow's rise within the society before the fall, and Lysander's rise now. There's some really, really cool imagery and in comparison that, God, I just want to go through and reread all of it with this context, you know?
Welcome to why people love books so much and like good stories. Like you're just like, oh fuck, I love this. Like I can't escape this. I'm just going to reread it forever. And it's like, no, you should try other things too. But like also maybe reread some of your favorites. So, you know, to speak a little bit meta, it started with a very strong story so as to ensure that this continued. But, you know, it's, I'm glad it got its hooks in you, you know, especially with all the additional perspective that you can now go back and reflect on.
Yeah.
You know, at a certain point, it reads like dramatic irony when you read it while going back, where you'll see this and be like, oh, this is a payoff there. No, this is a payoff there. So, right. Yeah. The whole interaction, of course, during the Via Triumphia with Atlantia is a ferocious one, from giving the scar to the conversation about to be feared or loved. The tension of the whole thing is very palpable, and just the scene, just, again, to quote myself last week, fucking wow. Her words drip with venom equaled only by Hypatia, I think, you know. Then, shall we proceed with the assassination, she even says? Like, there's just so much, like, dripping venom throughout anything that Atalantia says until the engagement.
It's just so matter of fact. Like both of them know that both of them know exactly what's going on. To a certain extent, like nobody's caught off guard here. Unlike the action scenes that we often bring up as wanting to see on screen, this is something that I think could really be well done on screen. It could also be super cheesy and super like phoned in, but I think given the right direction, this could be a really, really powerful, grand scene.
I would totally agree. I think it could be this is a fantastic interpersonal moment to be shared at the top of the triumph in front of everyone. You can imagine it in a very like gladiator-esque context, and it's very visual. I agree with you there for sure. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the proposal, right? Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, we went from To Catch a Predator to Cougar Snatcher real fast with Lysander.
I think this really just shows that he's only going to be happy if he's in some sort of predatory relationship. It doesn't matter if he's the predator or the prey, I guess.
Boy.
So,
oh no.
Yeah.
I would say our boy, but fuck that.
He's not our boy anymore, man.
You remember when I like was having a tough time defending him during those sections where I was like, yep, nope, you're right. Like she's underage for sure. It's like this whole time in the back of my head, I was like, yeah, Lysander fucking sucks, dude. Like
that doesn't change that.
No, but it also changed. Like I had to kind of like morally defend him to some degree, and I was like, I don't agree with that at all. But like the Golds are more emotionally mature earlier on. I remember making that argument like 2 or 3 times. Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh man, different society. It could be different. I don't know, but I was like, well, and obviously it is different. So maybe that's also not fair. But still, like, oh boy. And then after the proposal, he goes to a party. Atlas gets super drunk because he kind of knows what's going on. He escapes his assassination, and then he fucks his foster mother's sister. Wow. Foster-ish mother, I guess, but like basically aunt. What?
I mean, getting rid of the actual like legal definitions of all the comparisons. He basically cucks his cousin with his aunt, right? Like, right. It's not his cousin, it's not his aunt, but they're basically like that's effectively what they are to him.
Yeah, it's upsetting. It doesn't get better.
It's gonna be a real fun family reunion, you know. Like, shit's going down.
Oh man. I can only imagine what the Christmas card looks like, right? Like, It's got to be a lot of fun. Ajax just sitting there in the corner, like, I'm not getting any
he's
anymore.
He's got to be, like, in the background behind a couple bushes, like, looking out at them, getting their
daggers.
Picture taken.
And it's not even, like, a staged photo. He's actually trying to kill Lysander. It's like, this is his vulnerable moment when he's not wearing anything else. Yeah, fuck.
Yeah.
What sucks, like, well, I think actually it does suck. You know, like, books can be and should be sexual in their own rights, but the fact that the, like, one real, like, not even real, it's like a half page of, like, sex scene in quotes that we get is with Atalantia here is kind of upsetting in a lot of ways. Like, he's fucking her between, like, a portrait of the family and, like, a starport with, like, the snake around her neck. Like, there's a whole lot of fucking shit going on here.
It jumps off with something to the effect of, she takes me in her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man.
And, like, okay, I'm totally fine with Pierce Brown including sex scenes, but why is this one the first sex scene we get of the whole series? Like, why is this?
Why is this the moment? Why here? Why now?
I guess it can only get better. But
I don't know if that's true. Why would you curse us like that, Crossland?
I hope it gets better. But fair point. Yeah, I was a little bit soul crushed. I was like, oh man, fuck, really? Like, I get this. It's good description. It's well done enough to, like, be subtle and, like, not overbearing. And, you know, we're not treading into, like, a romance novel territory. There's nothing wrong with that. But, like, combination sci-fi and everything else, you can add a little bit more. You can touch on this as long as it's, you know, occasional, and do it as you will. Obviously, authors choose as you will. Love it how it's played in the Greenbone saga, but this just hurt because it was Atalantia and Lysander, and I'm just continually upset about it. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah,
Angry.
I'm with you. I'm completely with you.
Fuck. All right. So he fucks his aunt, but not really his aunt. Like, kinda. So then we move into chapter 90, Lysander, his other aunt. I mean, the Love Knight. It's a joke, but not really.
It's not.
It's not.
It's the
It doesn't get
same.
better. It only gets different. Lysander is pining after older women in his life that were
It completely undermines
to him in childhood.
It completely undermines the idea that, yeah, this is fucked up, but I'm doing it for a cause. Because if he had the choice, he'd go for Calendora.
Well, and I think that there's an argument that he thinks that he might have had a choice if he would have gone there immediately, but
yeah, it's still fucked.
So the shitty part about this, of course, is that, like, Calendora only meant the best for Lysander, and yet he ends up with the worst of the two near aunts. You know, the one he loves is sitting here dying on the bed, and the one that he kind of loathes is the one that he's actually sleeping with in bed every night. But it's very poetic in a way that the men in the series continue to make, you know, a couple of false choices in this sort of fashion.
Yeah, I suppose so. No matter what, I think this is all Atalantia pulling the strings, though. You know, like,
yeah, I think she's also capable of convincing herself that she would love him, you know, as she's, like, saying it. And she's also saying that not only to convince him, but to convince her, because, you know, she thinks the word holds all the weight. But yeah, I feel that. I understand that. So chapter 90, Lysander, the Love Knight. Does this chapter hurt? Calendora, the other aunt, only meant the best for Lysander, and yet he ends up with the worst of his two near aunts, one that he loves and the other one that he kind of loathes. It's very poetic for him in a way that the men in this series continue to make these sort of false choices in relationships and otherwise. And I don't mean all the men, of course. I think that Darrow ended up correct, and I think that Severo did, but most of our other characters, Cassius otherwise, make these horrific relationship missteps. But what do you make of kind of the Calendora situation?
I mean, we are kind of expected. I feel like I was expected to hope for Lysander and Kalendora to like end up on top somehow. And that still would have been fucking weird, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, and I don't know if expected was the right way to put that, but like that seemed to be emotionally the way I was being pulled. Like, no, think about this. This could have been how it ended. And even that's fucking weird. So, I don't know. I don't know where to lie on all of this.
It's tough to say, right? Because like you kind of in the back of your head throughout all of this are like regretting Lysander's choices for him, because if you would have, Kalendora was here for him throughout the series. It's still obviously messed up, but at the very least she's honest, and that's kind of the thing at the end of the day. Even though like she is older than him by a margin, and kind of everything else that's going on, she's still, of the pair of options of near-aunts, she's the more honest one. She's the more open one. I don't know. All of that makes it feel better. And it's not as though they're blood related, so obviously it's okay that way, but it's just, I don't know. You could feel like a better world would have came from a Kalendora-Lysander relationship than a Lysander-Atalantia relationship will ever birth. Yeah,
for sure. That's true.
Yeah.
The one problem is that assumes that Atalantia doesn't exist. Because I think, we're in a position where we're in a better world because Lysander did go with Atalantia. Is my like guess?
Yeah,
on all of
that's.
this.
I mean, that's fair. I guess the step between the two to some degree is that was there a way to maybe depose Atalantia and protect Kalendora? And I think the answer is probably firmly no, because Atalantia is so good at 4D chess. Like she clearly. It's not clear, but we should maybe talk about it now. So the gauntlets that she looks at that are on her bedside after she mentions that she was poisoned and is dying, after she's talking about Atalantia, seems to indicate that she believes that Atalantia poisoned her via the armor that she's wearing.
Right. Yes.
So
that's the read I got off of it too.
Yeah. So like, you would have had to play these cards so far in advance to have figured out that issue that I don't see that being likely or coming.
So, but that falls into the same category of my thought on Glarostes and trying to find an antidote to this poison. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it makes sense to commit any sort of time to that.
Okay, to the Dragon in Gilrostes again opens up like a whole can of worms, because I don't think that he would ever. He's never shown anything against Alexander. Excuse me, Alexander's dead because of Lysander, but he's never shown anything against Lysander, right? He's always been positive, and he was supporting the Rising before actively. He gave Darrow the Storm Gods. He made them function.
Yes.
So he was for the protection of Mercury. But
I think my assumption in that, thinking about that, sorry, we're getting into the same conversation again, but I think Atalantia is okay with sacrificing Mercury as a means of duping Darrow.
But it also would have killed everyone. It would have killed Lysander, Gilrostes, literally everyone on the ground. Atlas, after he was captured, of course.
I don't think she cares.
Yeah, but that's a
I don't think she gives
bad
a shit
move.
about that. If it kills Darrow, then fucking
but they were going to be ready to move it almost at the same time as the biological weapon was going to be deployed. So I don't know if, like, I understand where you're coming from for sure, and this becomes a measure of, do we know when things could have happened with the weapons against each other? Like, could the EMP have gone off so that Darrow could have escaped with the forces before Atalantia's biological weapon struck? Don't know. We don't have that strict answer.
Right.
But I do understand your point, though. Just kill them all.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately Gilrostes and Atlas and Lysander arguably were all fighting. Lysander's probably fighting for his own life more than anyone else, but Atlas and Gilrostes, at the very least, were fighting for the lives of Mercurians, right? Like, they were fighting for Mercury. Yeah, thank you for criticizing my correction.
Oh, no, I love it.
I realized it, but yeah.
I like having moral superiority on the name of this
Yeah, fuck
dude
me, right?
After, like, being adamant and confident about how wrong I was.
Fair point. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, it makes sense for Gilrostes to bend back because he wants to survive himself, and he also wants the people of, he cares about the people. Because without people, art doesn't matter. And that's like his perspective.
Yeah, that's fair. That's pretty true.
That's literally
we talked about this before, right?
He talks about. Yeah, it's the parable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So at the very least, supporting people. Anyway, rounding back to the conversation, though, I think Gilrostes is actively working to try to solve this problem, but he's just not skilled enough. It's not his skill set, which is why he can't do it. And that's why Lysander points it out, and he's like, well, I'm a fucking genius. At the very least, I'm going to try. So.
Yeah.
I think that's good enough. But I don't think he's in Atalantia's pocket. But regardless, she's poisoned and she's going to die, which is unfortunate. But she also reflects on Ajax's likelihood of seeking vengeance, against Lysander, which, as we've seen, is likely going to happen. Because he's getting drunk to tolerate the whole thing, lover scorned and everything else. I think this whole perspective is correct as well, as she recounts the Icarian parable, right? Love may give one wings, but everything burns when it flies too close to the sun. And I think that is exactly what Ajax is experiencing, is he is now on the other side of this, where it's like, well, we publicly can't admit that we were fucking each other because you are my aunt and you're trying to be the sovereign. And that's a little weird because you don't have enough power to just say that this is happening. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have been trying pretty desperately to figure out if there's any sort of actual connection between Darrow's call sign in Morningstar and this moment, or if it's just kind of fitting to use Icarus in both cases. Like, I'm trying to draw a parallel because clearly both are not even like underhandedly. They are explicitly calling Icarus in these moments, and I want some sort of connection. I don't know if it exists. I don't think it does. I think it just is applicable to both, but
I certainly understand. And it, to disconnect a little bit, it's in Golden Sun. It's his call sign, not Morningstar. But that
is it. Really Golden Sun? Okay,
it's Golden Sun, but it doesn't.
Positive,
again,
but
that doesn't make a difference. You could also extract this a little bit and think about Darrow's case of love in the abstract a little bit more, and think about the fact that, like, he's kind of failed his family in its own way, in the sort of immediacy of his parentage. Not that he's failed his family in terms of what he's striving for, which is long-term, their freedom, their survival, and things like that, but is also maybe flying too close to the sun because he can't be both the dad that he wants to be and the warlord. So, yeah, I mean, I think it fits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's fair. Okay.
Ajax, though. Angry leopard.
Angry
leopard boy.
Mad cat.
Ooh, but not like the fireworks. Man, the relationship here that develops between the two of them and sort of the brutal honesty that flows from Calendoria about Octavia is fantastic. I think she alludes that Atalantia potentially plotted to kill her as well, and like we said, the gauntlets and components like that, but that Lysander was her missing piece of the puzzle, which is why she probably decided to kill her. So parts of me question different components, right? Is it that he would die and be a martyr for her, or is it that or was she like ultimately aiming at a relationship between the two of them to like unite the power? I think I'm leaning towards the first answer, not the second.
I think it kind of straddles both. I think that Lysander's existence allows for her to move forward in a lot of different arenas that she wouldn't be able to otherwise. I don't think it's entirely as black and white as positive or negative Lysander. I think it's more Lysander exists and is tied to me, so I have access to these additional resources, if that makes sense. So I don't know. Does that fall in line with those sort of answers in any sort of way?
I think it does enough.
She's going to use him effectively, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, as effectively as possible, right? Like, that's the end all be all. But I think that the poisoning of Kalendora points us more towards her leaning into the idea that she was aiming towards the relationship than she was assassinating him, regardless. And that she believes, even at that moment, that she's still in power via the Triumvia. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, entirely.
Okay.
I'm with you.
All right. And then the truth about the death of Lysander's family comes out, which is a big thing that's been lingering on us for a while now. Octavia killed her own daughter and a son of Arcos, Brutus au Arcos, as we know, and they died at the direct hands of Kalendora and Atalantia, Lysander's two love-struck auntie types. There's something to say there about the regret that they feel about the actions they executed, right? Kalendora feels the guilt that she has to tell, and Atalantia doesn't, right? They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And Octavia, the schemer she is just fucking gnarly, right? This whole situation is gnarly. How'd you feel about the whole thing?
So the fact that all of this affection is potentially driven by guilt, and maybe it's not anymore, but it was.
Yeah.
Makes this relationship even more fucked up and complicated and hard to really suss out the intentions of anybody here. This makes it so fucking weird to dissect, and I don't know where to go from here with it,
For sure. Yeah. It's it's definitely not easy, right? It's a tough conversation, especially when you throw in the pandemonium chair. And all the missing points of memory.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I figured early on that there was something really kind of fucky with his memory, with his mom kind of being missing. And I attributed it to the mind's eye training. There's kind of the mention that the mind's eye has to be broken into you. And I assumed that was all physical breaking, but I'm wondering now if it's just as equally emotional breaking. You have to be emotionally broken into this. And instead of being crippled by trauma, Octavia decided to go through with this as a means of building a disciple or a protege, if you will.
I think both of those are great descriptors for what Lysander is, disciple or protege.
Yeah, I kind of both.
Right.
And if, I'm wondering specifically if killing his parents was necessary in order to get him to move forward in their training, and removing their memory from him was important in getting him to not be a crippled shell of a person and actually take those lessons and move forward with them. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Totally makes sense to me.
That's kind of the thought process I'm going in with this. It wasn't that there was anything that his parents did to piss off Octavia. It's that she saw potential in him. And in order to unlock that, she needed some emotional trauma.
Interesting. I don't know if it's so much like she needed to unlock some emotional trauma. Wait, are you saying Calendor or Octavia needed to?
Octavia needed to needed to expose Lysander to trauma.
Emotional trauma. In order
both physical and emotional. But the emotional trauma would have been crippling to the point where she wouldn't have been able to go forward with her lessons if not for deleting the memory of his parents.
Interesting. I feel like it's more of a fixation because I think especially, you know, I totally understand where you're coming from. And again, we're at a point of mostly conjecture. But for me, the way that I read this is I think more about the sort of things that Anastasia stood for, which as a reformer, she's closer to Virginian opinions, believing that lower colors should have rights and things of that nature. And that there was the coup being planned by Rivas, of whom also we know that the Raws kind of align with, you know, maybe not full reformer values, but at the very least they have a better approach, I would say, than the core golds do. So those kind of factors together made sense for her to assassinate them, Brutus and Anastasia, and then she chooses to, you know, remove the memory because she wants Lysander to only remember these moments and not question any of his ideals or beliefs that he has, that she's instilled in him.
Right.
And I think that the mind's eye, though, to your point, though, is physical and emotional battery, but I don't know if or at the very least the way that Octavia instilled it was physical and emotional battery, but I don't know if that's the end all be all for, you know, how it happens or how it comes about.
Right.
But,
okay.
Yeah. It's tough, but
yeah,
I don't feel like it was necessary. I feel like the Anastasia removal was more to ensure that that Lysander was a good little zealot, which is why I liked your kind of terminology with him being indoctrinated in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I fit with that for sure.
Understood.
Yeah. Oh man, a horrendous time though. Like we've like heard these memories. We've been talking about it since Iron Gold with the piano and everything else, and fucking oh god, what's the old Raw lady's name? Not Dido, not Diomedes, of course, not Seraphina. The grandma Raw. It'll come to me in a bit, but
it's gonna come to me too. I have no idea.
Yeah. But like when she was clearly triggering it because she knew where Rivas stood, you know, where like her husband stood. And so it feels as though it's one of those things where she knew exactly what she was playing at in those moments and exactly what she was trying to unlock in him. And yet Lysander chose wrong because he's a fuck. But here we are.
Well, you know, yeah, of course he was.
So
always a fuck.
We leave this very sad moment with Calendor as she dies, kind of imparting this love, and Lysander realizing that this love of his life, in quotes, he's a 20-year-old, died here. This aunt love of his life died here.
Love,
and it is. Let's not try to completely downplay the sadness. It is sad compared to his current predicament, right? That he's in. He definitely had a strictly better option.
Right.
But yeah,
so I just have to bring this up because we've talked about Ant YouTube.
Oh, no. Is that different than Aunt YouTube?
Well, I mean, yes, it is. But there is a great subsection of the English-speaking populace that the term aunt for us is pronounced ant. Mm-hmm. And the sign-off for Ants Canada is it's Ant Love Forever. And I feel like it's appropriate here.
It's very appropriate, I think.
Yep. It's
upsetting in every way, though. Like, let's not try to downplay that at all. I'm angry about it. So Lysander leaves this, and Calendora dies, Atalantia potentially being one of the last people to talk to her, of course, after this whole thing, and they kind of smile, and they go through the rest of their day, and he arrives back, and they go to the chamber, and she's crying because she's upset at the death of Calendora, of which we can assume is fake, you know.
I assume it's fake.
and she like they have sex again, and when in quotes when she is done with me, she turns over to sleep, and I lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling dead inside. And I feel a very abrupt shift here for Lysander, of course, because he's found out the death of his parents. He's found out how he's been manipulated by his grandma, of whom he's adored over the course of the last 2 books. He's kind of seeing his like naivete shoved in his face, and it kind of feels like his motivations might be shifting or changing a little bit here to some degree. Like,
I don't know if I agree with that entirely. Sure. I think his motivations have stayed the same. It's just the emotional taxing nature of putting on a face and consoling somebody like Atalantia, even falsely so. False in a couple senses. Falsely feeling like you need to console them, and then consoling them for false feelings. Like, it's just draining and upsetting, and he's going through the motions of something he absolutely doesn't want to do. And he's laying there feeling like, is this even fucking worth it? That's kind of where I'm at with my read on this scenario. Not that they both know that this is all bullshit, but there's bullshit about.
Yes, bullshit abound for sure. And I'm not strictly disagreeing with you in concept either. It's not as though you're right. It's not as though his motivations have changed. It's that his leverage has changed. Before, he was willing to kind of play the part of pet to some degree, to try to execute this glorious societal goal. But now that he knows the truth of what happened during his upbringing, he's like, absolutely fucking not. And even in death, he kind of rejects Kalendora for similar reasons. So here he is, the limp body on the bed, basically going through the motions. And oh my God, there's just, it fucking sucks. Like, this for Lysander blows. Can you imagine? Like, he's been misled for so long and been beaten down with all these truths and facts and whatever, and he's been lied to his entire fucking life. So, like, a little bit of sympathy there, but it's got to change more than that for me to come back around. So
I don't know. It's hard to come back from that.
Hard to come back from the strict spacism. So fucking referring to a 20-year-old as a child soldier and calling Darrow a slave because he won't answer you when you called his name.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked.
Offensive. So with that, chapter 91, Virginia, salvation or vengeance. And finally, after a long break, we have a moment back with Virginia before the end of the story. We finally get details on what fuzzily happened with Cassius. He was spared by Diomedes, secluded to Europa, and then broke out to return.
I still don't know if I trust it, man.
Yeah.
The fuzzy details at best, or the details being fuzzy at best, it makes me really not trust him. I don't know. There's not another book. There's not another book that can like console me right now into thinking that, yeah, this is a completely above the board thing. Because there's never been an above the board hidden agenda in this book. It's always been subterfuge. Always been hidden motives. There's always been just bullshit. And I don't understand why I'm expected to trust Cassius in this sentence, like in this moment here. You know?
Whoa, that's not the turn that I expected here. You're expecting Cassius to be an asshole?
I mean, I'm at least not expecting him to be just straight up on board with the Rising. I don't think he's going to be a turncoat for the society, but I think he's going to be out for vengeance for Darrow.
Okay. To that point, I think at the end of the day, he's pro Darrow, regardless.
I don't know. There's something fishy about the sentence. What was the actual quote? The details of his escape were fuzzy at best. Like there's something fishy there, and I don't know what to make of it.
I think you're reading into the wrong fishy. if that makes sense. Like, in my opinion, I think that you're reading into the wrong Fishy. I think the wrong Fishy is assuming that he broke out and that Diomedes didn't, like, let him go or, like, planned to let him go.
I think absolutely
that's the,
think
quote,
that's
fishy
true.
part.
Yes.
So I think that's the, quote, fishy or fuzzy part of the whole thing. I don't think that it's because Diomedes is the most honorable man we've met in this series in a long fucking time.
That's a good point.
And I can't imagine him not going the honorable path and like saying, okay, this is a moment in which I don't trust Atalantia anymore, and so I'm going to call for this release to some loyal guards of whom will do this, and so like he escapes. But he blames on this fuzzy details because he doesn't want to sell out Diomedes' position in case it makes it back. You know, like I see those kind of things.
I can see that.
I don't see Cassius being a negative force here because he's literally saving Darrow's life. If he's on the side of the Rim, if he's on the side of the society, why would he have picked up Darrow and saved him? That makes no sense. Darrow was trapped. Darrow was toast.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. With that, I don't have an answer. Like, I don't have a comeback.
Save him so they could die on Mars?
That's a very
that
good
doesn't
point.
make any sense. Yeah.
It's a very good point.
Yeah. So
let it be known, though, that I don't entirely trust him.
Okay. I think I've never trusted Cassius more. In complete counter. Because he like literally is saving Darrow from a death situation. This should be, by all accounts, the end of Darrow.
Everybody's assuming it's the death of Darrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So by all accounts, he's being saved by his old best friend. And by someone that we assumed was dead. So it's like it's a combination of things where it's just this to suddenly become a betrayal. It feels very much Firefly dinosaurs on a ship, mashing them against each other and saying, "Curse you for my inevitable betrayal." You know, as
curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Yes, thank you for the proper quote. Yep. Oh man, but man, this chapter feels like preparation for the next war, doesn't it? And it feels like it's also going to be fought by our two lead women, Virginia and Victra. No?
Yeah, the V sisters, man. Like,
yeah.
God, if that ever gets coined as a term within this universe, I am going to like burn this entire series. Like, I'm going to take all of the books and make a nice, very warm bonfire. Please don't call them the V sisters, Pierce.
You have to add Volga to that mix as well if you're going to go with the V sisters.
Shit. Now it's going to happen because you said that and you pointed that out. That's going to happen. And I'm going to have to like go and burn all of the books. Fuck.
It is like a superhero name point at that point, you know, superhero team name. I feel that for you. Yeah. I mean, it feels very clear, you know, to me, thinking about the next book and everything else. It feels very clear that I'm also very excited to see Virginia and Victra lead a front line, you know, to varying degrees, and see them be in the thick of combat, because I feel like that's kind of where we're headed until Darrow comes back up to snuff and maybe we save Severo. It feels like they're going to be the warriors, which I'm super excited for.
Yeah. No, I'm super down for that. Do you think we'd see Victra's point of view at that point, or would we see it all through Virginia?
I want Victra's point of view.
I do.
I think I really do. I think I really want Victra's point of view. Yep. I'm going to stand by that.
Yeah,
I understand
I'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think all that you gain from Victra's point of view is especially like, does she care about the Republic as much as she appears to, or does she care about vengeance and like the well-being of man more? Like, what's Victra's end game?
Yeah.
Which right now it's vengeance on a large scale, but I'm curious as to what her political end game is.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a good ad. It's not perfectly necessary, but I would support a Victra POV. I think Volga is like a must-have, and a Victra would be a nice to have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if we can only add one point of view, it's Volga.
Yeah, right.
Victra's a possibility. I don't think we need it.
I would also kill for a Diomedes point of view.
That'd be fucking sweet.
All right.
Yeah.
That's where my brain goes. I'm like,
sweet.
If I have a wish list, It's right up there. I don't think that I want to be inside of Atlas's head because I think it'd be very melancholy for the most part. And it would be way too complex. It'd be too much 4D chess. It'd be too much thinking as opposed to action. But I appreciate him as a character nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Anyway, Diomedes though, for sure. Like I'm in on that. But yeah. Virginia and Holiday have this conversation about what Mars means to them. Virginia asks, "What does Mars mean to you, Nakamura?" And she says, after a pause, "Hope, and you, my liege?" And Virginia replies, "War." And to me, that gives me shivers every time that I read it, because Mars, of course, is the god of war. But so he really obviously shouldn't be shocked. But on top of that, she's been reflecting about the way that like Mars has caused her a fuck ton of pain. This planet isn't. It's more than that. It is a source of pain profoundly throughout her life, but it's also a source of joy. And so, like, she sees Mars as this place of war. It's the birthplace of Darrow. It's the birthplace of her family. It's the fall of her family. It's the Iron Rain. It's the death of her father. It's all these different things. It's so complex, but it is at its core war.
Yeah. Pairing this with like that sort of sacred word heart vault that she talks about in this section.
Yeah.
That gets broken into and shat upon, with home being one of the few words in it. It really makes me curious about her view of Mars. And has this always been her view of Mars, or has it been entirely corrupted by past events, recent events? And would she have viewed Mars as home or hope or anything else positive without that sort of experience? Or has she always viewed Mars as war?
I think that it's a more recent change. I would argue in the last like 12 years, right? Like not dating back to like the death of her mom, but I think that's maybe a starting point, you know, for this being kind of a place of conflict in her life. And then the Institute and, you know, losing a brother to another brother and all of the different conflicts that have happened. So, I mean, I understand her opinion of it being war. It's just, oof, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's difficult to particularly point the finger at, but I feel like it does start post Darrow. Like that's when we really come into this.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think so.
But man, Cavax, that adopted father, oh man, I can't imagine how much he hurts after Daxo's death. It just sucks. I love the family, Telemanus's literal family tree as it's described, but it's a profound pain here, man. As he says, it is a tragedy to see any man sacrifice his nature for his vocation, much less a man I love so much. I mean, obviously Virginia, sorry. But it stings in all the ways with Cavax because he is sacrificing at every turn. And, you know, by God, it hurts. I hurt for him more than I heard for most of the other characters in the series.
Yeah. Yeah. This is another one of those points that really, really hurt for me. I love their memorial tradition. And there's something to be said about the Telemanuses and their pride and strength, but also sort of their caringness and their tenderness. How well, for the lack of a better term, rooted they are in reality and in society and in their own actions, that this sort of ceremony and the planting of a tree in their name is so fitting for me. And I can't, I've been trying to figure out a way to elaborate on that more, and I can't. I can't think of the right way to put it, but it's a strong thought and emotion for me thinking about that and their connections. So I don't know.
Yeah, I really appreciate that view on the legacy of Telmanus, and I think it's Telmanus. I think it's really difficult to pick it apart, right? Because it is so meaningful. It's very powerful, and I said family tree, but it's more like a family forest, and there's something there to the whole thing, and it's great. I mean, it's fantastic. It's ritualistic again. If we're talking about the deaths of families, we're comparing. We can compare the Julii to the Romulus to the Telemanus, and each of them faced very different things. And Julii is one of endurance, and Romulus again, the Raz is one of pride and endurance, and the death of Telemanus is a very sort of serene experience, I think, in a very different way to the other two. I think that it's more of an acceptance of the end rather than an understanding of what death is. And that, to me, I think is a lot. It's more profound. It also speaks to Kavex's nature and the family's nature on the whole. And man.
Yeah.
Ugh. Hurts. It hurts.
Yeah. It hurts.
It hurts. It hurts. I can't help it. It hurts. My back. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So they run the Iron Circle, and man, what a moment that is. What a fantastic, uplifting moment to have here after all of this defeat. Mars endures and is still on Virginia's side, still on the Sovereign's side after all of this hell. After they lost a continent, after it's been partially burned. It's such a fantastic winning moment for the group.
Mm-hmm. This moment entirely changes the meaning of the Iron Circle from, what does she say? Look how big my cock is. To
right.
Almost as meaningful or as meaningful as a triumph. Like it's essentially a triumph.
Yeah, right.
I love the scene. I loved everything about it. And yet again, this is something that's going to look amazing on screen whenever that gets adapted. This is going to look super fucking cool.
I could not agree more. This is a fantastic example of a great app that you can give a lot of visual representation to and make it feel really emotionally punchy. Like this is your season finale in a way, right? Like this could be a crazy moment between the pointing. I honestly, I would switch these two chapters. I'd switch the Graveyard of Tyrants and this moment. But
But
that way you end on a positive.
They're parallel anyway.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly. And of course, to top that off, we reunite with Pax, and it's a bittersweet moment. But Kavex stepping in and sweeping him up is kind of something else after she's not able to embrace him because she has to hold up her appearances. But it's great, like the whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Not only is it bittersweet, but it also brings kind of a point we've been discussing for a long time, mostly with Darrow, but more and more often with Mustang, is kind of the separation of their personalities into different beings altogether. She says, and I quote, "The mother must wait her turn." Like that's why it's bittersweet, because she is not, I guess it can be said, she's not allowing herself to be emotional right now. But the way we've been framing it, the Sovereign is not Pax's mother.
Right.
So
which is what she has to be.
Right. And he still has a relationship with the Sovereign, but it's not the same as his relationship with his mother. So she has to wait her turn, in that she's not allowing herself to be emotional in this sense, in this instant. I don't know. It's bittersweet's the right way to put it, because it is depressing. It brings up kind of the question of, are these the same person, or are they separate people?
Yeah, and again, I think that the only firm delineation, really firm delineation that I have in my mind is Darrow and the Reaper. But also the responsibility of the Sovereign is separate from the responsibility of motherhood, which I think is a different thing. I think Darrow kind of maybe he conflates the two, maybe he doesn't. But, like it's a thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to fully, firmly stand on either side of the line. But yeah,
I think there has to be a clear delineation between the two, because otherwise she would be conflicted in this moment.
Yeah, right.
She just understands wholeheartedly that right now I am the sovereign. I cannot break to celebrate with my son.
Yeah, right.
I need to do what needs to be done, and later the mother will get to celebrate. So I don't think it's conflict at all.
I think it's a perfect delineation, though, like you said. It's a perfect delineation.
Yeah.
Good point. Great point. Then we move into a section with Harmony, right? And Pax passes Trigg's engagement ring for Ephraim, the ring that they exchanged. And the knowledge of his demise hurts me and hurts Holiday terrifically. Because I think the two of them really never got to make up after the argument that happens all the way back in Iron Gold when they see each other last at the end of the book. They sort of disown each other in their own ways. And that sucks, especially how much we know Ephraim grew and how much we know that like Ephraim and Pax meant to each other. And kind of the whole situation, the death of Ephraim hurts.
Yeah, it does.
It's a serious consequence of this book.
This loose end between Holiday and Ephraim is... I mentioned earlier that there are very few times in this entire series that I got like emotional. And I think I also mentioned, in addition to the sort of swimming, there was another one in this section. This is that.
Yeah.
Strange. Like I didn't expect this. If I were to like casually look through sort of the cliff notes of this book, this wouldn't strike me as something that would grip me, but it did. It really did. Like I don't understand why, but this was a very emotional part for me.
I think it's horrifying. Like it sucks so much. It reminds me of sort of the general picture of wives or husbands that are greeted with like a casket or a flag back home. And it's very reminiscent of those kind of moments. And I think that's why it stings so much. But on top of that, you tag in the fact that like they weren't able to make up, and the last interaction they had was largely negative. But Ephraim held up his side of the deal, and they just never got to, come back to a moment in which they were really together and agreed on something again, because they had kind of broken up as like a family through Trigg at the beginning of Iron Gold. And then this whole, like, I love, especially in a reread, this is so brilliantly written. I love Ephraim's journey, and I love the way that it ends, because he goes from a very jaded person to a welcoming, loving, and accepting person after he kind of figures out his own sobriety and his own limits and things like that. And it's very important and critical to the character for him to have dealt with that. And I just, woof, man, Ephraim hits different in additional rereads, and especially, man, in this book, I miss the dude. I'm already very upset about what the next book looks like, because it's not going to have Ephraim in it. Because I liked Ephraim so much, but
you don't know.
No, I'm pretty confident that Ephraim's dead. I'm fairly certain, actually.
Yeah. I know,
but I do hope that at the end of the series we get some. I'm sure we'll get some ring back to Ephraim when things end positively. I hope ? Either Volga or Lyria or someone will be carrying that fire, and I think that's the reality, right? Like, he inspired fire in other people now. Like Pax, Electra, Volga, and Lyria all carry that fire in different degrees, and I think someone, at the very least, Pax, of who I believe will survive the series, will carry that fire forward. So, man. F, I miss you so dearly. Fuck.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. So We also learn during this conversation that Pax, by way of the Oculus, seems to have sent Lyria off for repairs. We kind of had alluded to that before, but we get a more strict, note here.
Yeah. So we know that there is some sort of connection between Quicksilver and Figment and Glorastes, but we don't know what their actual connection is, right?
Correct.
That's
for the
basically
most part.
all we know. As far as I can understand.
Well, the one thing that I would add is that we know that Glorastes was commissioned to build the was commissioned to build the Oculus. That we can't ignore that, right?
Right. That's why I brought him
by
up.
Quicksilver. Okay. Just want to make sure.
By Quicksilver. So we know Quicksilver, Glorastes, Figment. They are tied together in some way, whether it's all three together in the center, or if it's Figment is tied to, if Quicksilver is kind of an intermediary between Figment and Glorastes, or if they're all in. I don't fucking know. I just know that there is some sort of connection between the three of them, and I'm very, very curious how that all works.
Yeah. I think that's a big curiosity going into the next book because we don't get answers. So that's where we're going to leave Figment. For the most part. So as Virginia approaches Victra a little bit later while she's training, Victra is fucking angry, dude, and it's definitely understandable. She's had so much stolen from her over the course of this book, over the course of this second trilogy, stripped from her, that you can hardly blame her for wanting to go off and kill every last one of those motherfuckers who stole her family from her, who stole the livelihood from her, who stole the society that she wanted her kids to grow up in from her. She even quotes with Virginia after they kind of make up, as Victor kind of sees Virginia's moves as half measures. She says, "If we cannot engineer salvation for our men, then vengeance will suffice." And it is so poignant and brilliant. I love it. I love Victra. What thoughts do you have on Victra?
So just before that quote, there is the moment of Virginia kind of presenting her scars to Victra.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that point is what really turned Victra's anger away from Mustang.
An understanding of the pain.
Yeah. Kind of will be, assuming they go forward together in the next book, this will be kind of the inception point of their, it's not friendship. It's not their friendship. It's their dual companionship, I guess. That's not the right term either, I know. But their joining is right here.
Yeah, right. They're sort of convening in this moment.
Yeah.
Fuck. Yeah, man. This also gives me hope for that VV pairing that we were talking about earlier. Let the V's be badasses in the next book, and I'm a firm believer that that'll happen between the two of them.
And Volga, don't forget Volga.
Right, add Volga in for sure.
Otherwise, they're just a W.
Fair point. Triple U, is that better?
Triple U. There you go.
Triple U. Oh, man. So the final words of the section, of course, are that the Rim has come with the core, has become one with the core, and has taken back Earth from the Vox, we assume, because the Vox holds it ultimately. It's not the Republic anymore, it's the Vox. The Vox still holds Luna, even though they're kind of puppeteered by the Abomination. But truly, it appears as though it is Mars versus the entire solar system now. Not to say that there aren't rebel factions and things like that among everyone else, but, we are at a loss for easy ways out of this situation.
So there's a quote at the end of this saying that, effectively saying that Lysander is the one that brought all of this to head. And my initial reaction is, no, they didn't know that. There's no way he's the only one responsible for this. But at the same time, thinking about all the things that he did very recently made all of this possible.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going on the assumption that Glarostes didn't turn until presented with the opportunity to with Lysander. And I don't know, taking everything at face value, Lysander is the linchpin for all of this, and it's fucking crazy. But at the same time, I think they're still putting too much credit on Lysander for making all this happen, even though it's potentially true. Like, does that make sense? Like, I think it's ironic that they're right.
Yes, I do understand what you're saying. Them being like it being kind of an ironic correctness here, because they almost shouldn't have arrived at this point without, like, we can arrive at it because dramatic irony and we understand everyone's perspective, but it only makes sense. Like, the only character that it logically makes sense for to have like deconstructed to this point is Virginia, because she has enough wherewithal to have identified this to an extent, you know?
Right.
Did that match up with what you're saying? Like, does that?
Yeah, to an extent.
Was that enough?
Yeah. Totally.
Okay. Just making sure. I didn't want to underplay it, but I agree with you at large. It's like it would have happened, but not to the same extent as it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Lysander made a difference, but did he make the difference? That's kind of
like,
the question.
Is he the person to peg this on, like they are?
Yeah, and I don't entirely agree with that, because I think that the game of cards that Atalante had played up until this point was fantastic. She was doing so well with deception, using Julia Bologna, the whole thing. She's been playing excellently. Yeah. So I don't think that it was necessary. Like, Lysander is a bonus, but maybe he's a dead weight. He could be a dead weight. Mm-hmm. We'll see. With that chapter, the final chapter of the book, of us reading the series until the final book comes out, chapter 92, Graveyard of Tyrants. Just a couple of things here left to talk about, but to start it off here, there's a quote that I love. Lysander, of course, is abandoned here, left alone, with a bounty of food placed upon a long banquet table, so as to appease Apollonius, and he informs Roan and the others to pick him up in 2 hours, and gives them extra copies of his will just in case he dies, because who can fucking trust Apple? Yeah. The absolute madman. But the quote here: "The sense of insignificance and guilt I permitted Cassius to instill within me has not disappeared, but remains in the back of my mind as a reminder of the fate one can accept if he lets the mercy of others define him. Darrow's mercy all those years ago, Cassius's mercy in serving as my protector, Calendora's last testament, all of it rooted in the same vain attempt to rekindle honor they long ago sacrificed for one reason or another. I think, as with all things, honor is best appreciated in moderation, as is cruelty." And where to begin? Lysander is finally recognized now that he's been treated by everyone as this fucking child, not widely respected and lied to for decades of his life, and is here to strike out on his own, throwing away his self-righteous attempts at the purity of the image of an iron gold, and sheds it like a molting skin of a snake for one of a victorious conqueror, which feels like it fits with the Loon lineage.
So my read on this is that this is truly the inception of a very dark force for the next book. He is not only disregarding and like just kind of casting aside the kindnesses afforded to him by basically everybody that's helped raise him to a certain extent, but he's rationalizing that attempt at kindness as vain attempts at making amends with karma or something like that.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's spot on.
This is the inception of something truly, truly twisted for Lysander, because he's smart enough to really wield that in a horrible way.
Which I think is what he's doing here, right?
Yeah,
like he is
exactly.
With the arguments of Calendora, he is past a point of no return. Like, he has become a dark, dark character. And that is so problematic in so many ways for like the next book, because all of a sudden, like, he's been fake honor bound. Now, with Lysander potentially unleashed and like let off the leash, and all he has to do is justify it to other people, like his actions, there's no telling what he can do, what he can manage, what he can accomplish.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's dangerous, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, dangerous is one way to put it.
He is now, he went from like a mild threat, of whom, like had a philosophical point in the story, like a perspective, to now he's not only a mild threat, he is a valid threat, and he's dangerous, and now he's being made more dangerous because everyone that he believed was rooting for him is actually against him, and so he is now truly becoming a lone wolf, and that is problematic for everyone else.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to deal with.
In a similar tone, but a little bit different, I love the little line, one does not simply summon the Minotaur. It's totally a Boromir line, right? Like that's 100% what it is.
Yeah.
It's Sean Bean there. Yeah. I can imagine that. Can't help myself, but yeah.
Exactly.
On top of that, man, have I missed Apollonius's eloquent madness. It shows up. It's great to kind of have this return to form and to have him show up and see this sort of speech patterns again. And the deal that's struck between the two of them really showing, like you said, who Lysander's become here is something else. It's shocking. It's jarring. And the way that they shake hands and kind of agree on this sort of kill list that Apollonius is holding out, mostly the Grimaces first, and Atlas Au Ra tagged into the list until, the end. And he just cheers him, shakes his hand, and says, "To the trembling of worlds." And that is a terrifying line. It's a fantastic, evocative line.
This is going to be fucking rough, man.
Yeah.
This is
going
to be fucking rough.
Yep. Can you imagine waiting like 2.5 years for this book? Can you imagine the pain I feel mostly?
Well, I mean, I'm going to start to.
Yeah.
I'm going to start to feel that. Fucking shit. Like, I feel how... I understand how all you listeners feel now. Not to the same extent, because obviously you actually lived through it. But fuck.
Our final comment on this book is a quick and dirty one. And it is the graveyard of tyrants, of whom are all pointing, as opposed to Lune, where they belong, where the head of the society is. They're instead pointing towards Mars. And I think that is a fantastic scene to end with, as we've had many different moments pointing towards the next thing at the end of these stories. And, oh, fuck. Here it is. There it is.
Yeah. Beyond just narratively, them pointing at Mars, the culmination of 2 different trilogies coming home. Mm-hmm. Coming home to Mars seems like a wonderful like wrap up. Wonderful idea. So I'm excited. I don't know exactly what it means, but I know it's going to be fun.
I'm sure Phobos will play a big part.
Well,
at least a New York City sized part.
It'll play a fine part.
I'm
just ready for all the cooks to come out of the woodwork.
Cooks, all the Browns are going to show up, man. Let's not discount the fact it's the dude's last name. They're going to show up at the end. Don't not quote me on that.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, we would generally move into PJ's predictions, but here we're not going to predict anything because A, like the next book, is nowhere near, but B, we are also going to be doing a larger prediction episode, right? We want to do something a little bit different. So send in anything that you want PJ to comment on going forward to the next book. We would love to do a little mini episode that's pretty much just interactive. So send us thoughts, send us notes. We will comment on it. You have until the 22nd of October to get those in.
So when should this come out?
This comes out on the 15th. So it's
15th.
8 days. I'm going to send out the APB tomorrow though.
You got like a week.
I already did. Yeah. You've got a week. That's the game plan. So send those in. That's our question of the week as well. But we're going to talk about the last 2 weeks' question of the weeks here. So The question of the week that we've been talking about for a bit now, since Ephraim died, is what's your favorite earned death? To start it off here, we've got our members of our Discord, Cold-Blooded 007. Regarding earned deaths, I'd say Arthas from WoW. He is, as you kind of stated very eloquently over a couple of different messages, he is kind of the definition of, good for the cause and like fighting through to do the right thing, but for all the wrong reasons or with all the wrong intents. And I adore Arthas. I think that he is one of my favorite characters in all of fiction, which is why I brought him up at the beginning of Iron Gold. So I cannot agree with you more. And I think that this was my choice until you said it. So great call out for sure.
Also from the Discord, Artificer. When Iron Man snaps at the end of Endgame, sacrificing himself to save the world from Thanos and his army. I feel like that strictly and explicitly fits into this theme of noble sacrifice, I guess.
Yeah. And it's not, like the other part of this earned death thing is it's not just noble, it's also ignoble, right? Like there are people who deserved death who earned it and died appropriately. So that's kind of why we're kind of toying around this, right? So
yeah, for sure.
But in a similar way, since we're talking about two noble deaths in a row, Donna from our Discord said, the earned death that immediately came to mind for me was Thorin Oakenshield at the end of the Battle of Five Armies. Like Ephraim, he sacrificed himself so that others of the company could survive. Well done, Thorin. I couldn't agree more. I think that Thorin totally fits the theme. I think that dude is a fantastic example, and unfortunately, the movies in which he's encompassed are not as good as the Hobbit story, but that's just me.
True. From Ivana. Well, then I'll go with Boromir from the Two Towers. He's my favorite Lord of the Ring character, and he died protecting the hobbits. His last words with Aragorn. Jesus, how the fuck did I fuck that?
The fuck is that? Completely different book series.
I am reading. I'm not thinking.
It's an A, not an E. Anyway.
Shut the fuck up. His last words with Aragorn are heartbreaking, which is absolutely true. That's what I would have picked if Ivana hadn't picked it ahead of me. So
could not agree more. Good choice. It's a great choice. Boromir is a sacrifice for all time, all ages. Oh. So with that, we move to the Instagram ones that came to us from Instagram. Bradley2181, great to hear from you, Bradley. You say Harmony, and yeah, fuck yeah. Harmony earned her fucking death for sure. Yes, she deserved every moment of that fucking pit viper poison and those eggs laid inside of her and turning herself into a venomous piece of shit because fuck her. God damn. It's almost too kind.
So Stormzand. I know the first S probably isn't to be pronounced, but I'm going to do it anyway. Tommy from Never Let Me Go, Ishiguro. So much catharsis. I am not familiar with this.
I actually don't know either. This is unique. This is something that I'll have to check out. So, don't know whether or not to disagree or agree, but I would say that frequently anime arcs play around with death a lot more seriously. So I'm in on the idea.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Our good buddy Zeph. Hey Zeph. Jango Fett motherfucking had it coming. Of course he did.
Yeah. Dude deserved it. Dude spawned the clone armory. Dude was in on it. Dude had problems. Was just out for money. Deserved to die. But I'm very intrigued into the Boba Fett series coming out this December, needless to say. Daniel Kennemore, heiress from Final Fantasy VII. She fought her way to the Forgotten City to summon Holy and to die to join the Lifestream and stop Meteor. To most people, that probably sounds like word salad if you haven't played Final Fantasy. But
that is true. I don't understand what's being said here.
It is, again, fitting it within the Instagram characters. Great work because you explain the entire story very succinctly. But I totally agree. The sacrifice of Aerith is a huge deal, and I cannot imagine a more fitting character. I'm very intrigued into the direction that Final Fantasy VII Remake is going. because she doesn't die where she does. If you haven't played it, don't listen to that, but it's too late, so I can't undo it. So, it's neat.
Fair enough.
PJ, what's yours?
Nux from Mad Max Fury Road. The Blood Boy. No, not Blood Boy. Mad Max is his Blood Boy.
Blood Bag, yeah.
Blood Bag. What would he be referred to as?
War Boy. Nux is a War Boy.
War Boy. Yeah, so Nux the War Boy. Because it is the turn and subsequent sacrifice paired with what he's been striving for, which was his sort of his whisper of "witness me" to them, before he turns his war machine into the choke point. It's everything he wanted. At the same time, it is a complete 180 in his character. It's such a cool way to end him. I loved it.
I definitely agree. I think that it's fantastic because he is kind of, there are multiple protagonists of that story, but in his own way, he grows and he changes like a protagonist would. So I find his character arc fascinating. Mm-hmm. It's a fantastically written story. Definitely love that one. When I read that in the script, I was like, fuck yeah, that's a great choice. For me, I think that this is a little bit of recency bias, and having to kind of pick through a number of the ones that have already been said, but to differentiate a little bit, I recently was listening to, actually literally today, watched through Aliens again for the first time in a while and listened to a podcast from one of my favorite podcasting group, Doof Media. They put out an episode today literally on Aliens, bringing down James Cameron, and I have to say that fucking Burke from Aliens fucking deserves it. That young executive who ultimately doomed that entire fucking colony by sending them out to that alien vessel, telling them to investigate. Dude earned his alien impregnation and or the murder death regardless. He dies off screen. We know that he's going to die from a chest burster or something else, and A-okay with that. Yeah. A-okay with... Sure. He earned that. He fucked over so many people for a profit on something that he didn't understand whether or not it was going to be profitable for. Fuck you, dude. Especially with a bunch of religious colonists. How dare you?
Exactly.
Fucking shit.
Shit.
For next week, this is less for next week and more for the weeks following. The thing that we're going to be talking about is obviously send in any questions that you have, any predictions, anything you want us to talk about for the last episode of the season, quote, we'll call it. Since it's been a year, it kind of feels appropriate for this to be the bookend before we go into Mistborn. So spend some time, think about questions, and send them in.
Yeah, I'm excited to answer them.
After that, we are incredibly excited next week to have Piéra Forde on the show to discuss everything Red Rising.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. We already got initial notes back from the script and script quote, all the prompts that we generally send out. And she was like, can I swear? And I was like, fuck yeah, you can. You better swear. She's like, because I'm Australian and I can't help it. And I'm like, yeah, no, I totally get it. Good call. It was so excited. So it's going to be a great time. I can already tell.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun.
So that's where we'll leave you for the week.
Thank you, as always, Tim and Andrew, for keeping our show's lights on. Check out our links in the show notes. You can find our schedule, Patreon, previous episodes, our websites, our socials, fucking everything, all in one convenient location.
Yeah, we also want to take a second to thank our new patron, Hyena Frog. Thank you so much for joining us at the barback level, and it means a million to be supporting us and to have you join us this month. So thank you so much. Beyond that, if you have any other questions or anything like that, like PJ said, check out the schedule, leave us a review, do whatever it is you can do to support us, because we love you and we hope other people love us as much as you do. So share that love a little bit around.
Yep. Share it.
It was a little bit hippie-ish, but here we are.
That was a little weird, man.
It's fine. I'm editing. It doesn't matter.
All right.
All right. See you later, folks.
Goodbye.